Before we drift away, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more calming sleep stories. Sweet dreams await. The rain came down in steady sheets, the sound of it tapping against the thick forest canopy above blending with the distant growls of thunder. The narrow, winding road seemed endless, twisting through the dense trees as if the forest itself were trying to swallow the path whole. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth and pine, the kind of smell that clung to your skin and soaked into your clothes. You had been driving for hours, the last signs of civilization fading into memory as you journeyed deeper into the forest. The only light came from the headlights of your car, flickering and reflecting off the slick surface of the road, making everything seem eerie and distorted. The deep green of the trees, illuminated for just a moment, quickly fell back into darkness as you passed, leaving you with nothing but the sound of your tires on the wet ground. You had been invited to the lodge by an old friend, someone you hadn't seen in years. They had promised it would be the perfect escape from the noise of the world, a place to unwind and recharge. It sounded ideal at first, a small cabin nestled deep in the woods, far away from everything. The lodge, according to the letter they had sent, was hidden in the heart of the forest, far beyond the reach of cell service. No distractions, no interruptions, just the peace of nature. But as you approached the final stretch of the road, something about the place felt off. The lodge loomed ahead like a shadow in the rain, a silhouette against the fading light. It was larger than you expected, dark wooden beams stretching up into the sky, surrounded by trees that seemed to close in, creating a feeling of being trapped. The gravel driveway crunched under your tires as you pulled up to the front, the heavy rain making everything feel muffled, distant. You killed the engine, the sound of it sputtering out into the heavy silence. The only noise now was the relentless rain and the occasional crack of thunder that shook the air. There was no one around to greet you, no welcoming lights inside the lodge. Just the endless gray of the rain, the forest pressing in around you. Taking a deep breath, you grabbed your bag from the passenger seat and stepped out into the downpour. The cold air hit you immediately, making your skin prickle with goosebumps. The front door of the lodge was slightly ajar, creaking as it moved in the wind, and you couldn't help but notice how still everything seemed despite the storm. Felt raw, but you brushed it off. Maybe you were just tired from the long drive. The promise of warmth and a hot meal was enough to keep you going. You made your way to the door, your boots splashing in the puddles that had formed on the steps. Just as your hand reached for the door, you heard a sound behind you, distant, faint, but unmistakable. A crack of a twig breaking underfoot. Someone, or something, was out there in the trees. You froze. It was only for a moment, but it was enough to make your heart race. The air felt heavier, as if the rain itself were holding its breath. Your fingers hovered just inches from the weathered doorknob, the slight tremor in your hand betraying the unease that had settled in your chest. The sound of the twigs snapping echoed in your ears, almost as if the forest itself had grown aware of your presence, shifting, watching. You swallowed hard, trying to push the unsettling sensation out of your mind. It was nothing. Just the wind playing tricks, you told yourself. The storm had likely stirred some wildlife. But then another noise. A soft rustle as if something, or someone, was moving just beyond the trees. The forest seemed to grow darker, the shadows around you lengthening in the dim light. You glanced over your shoulder, trying to peer through the sheets of rain that blurred your vision, but there was nothing. Just the dense thicket of trees, their gnarled branches reaching like twisted fingers into the sky. You blinked, trying to clear your thoughts. There was no need to panic. The lodge was just ahead. Your friend was inside waiting for you. This was their home, wasn't it? With a deep breath, you turned the knob and pushed the door open. The old wood creaked, and the sudden warmth of the air inside the lodge hit you like a wave, a stark contrast to the cold, wet world outside. The smell of burning wood filled your nostrils, the faint crackling sound of a fire in the hearth offering a sense of reassurance. The atmosphere inside was cozy, but there was an odd stillness to it, as though the place had been waiting for someone, waiting for you. "Hello?" you called out, your voice echoing slightly in the spacious entryway. The walls were lined with dark wooden paneling, the ceiling high and vaulted, adorned with intricate carvings that seemed both ancient and out of place. The flickering light of the fire danced along the walls, casting long shadows that seemed to move and stretch like living things. You set your bag down near the door, listening intently for any sound from deeper within the lodge. There was no answer, but the fire crackled on, and you could hear the faint patter of rain on the roof above. The air felt thick, almost oppressive, as though the lodge itself were absorbing the moisture from the storm outside. A flicker of movement caught your eye, a figure in the corner of the room. For a split second, you thought you saw someone standing in the shadows near the fireplace. But when you turned, the space was empty. Your pulse quickened. It was only your imagination, surely. But as you stepped further into the room, your gaze was drawn to the large bay window on the far wall. Through the rain-smeared glass, you could make out the faint outlines of the trees beyond, their dark silhouettes swaying in the wind. There was something unsettling about the way the trees moved. Not just the wind, but something deliberate, something watching. You tried to shake off the feeling, telling yourself that it was just the storm playing tricks on your senses. But the unease lingered, crawling under your skin, making the warmth of the fire seem almost foreign. "Hello?" You called out again, a little louder this time, your voice trembling slightly. There was still no response. You walked deeper into the lodge, your footsteps soft on the old wooden floors, your eyes scanning the room as you passed. The walls were adorned with strange, antique decorations. Some you recognized, like old hunting trophies and paintings of long-forgotten landscapes, others unfamiliar, twisted in their design. Your gaze lingered on a large painting above the fireplace. A portrait of a man standing alone in the woods, his eyes dark and intense, his face carved with an almost unnatural stillness. A chill ran down your spine as your eyes met his in the painting. It was as if the man in the portrait knew something, as if he were waiting for you to make the next move. The sudden sound of a door creaking open behind you made you jump. You spun around, heart racing, to find a hallway leading deeper into the lodge. The door that had opened was just a crack, but the air felt colder in that direction, a strange draft coming from the darkened hallway. You walked toward it cautiously, your hand resting on the smooth surface of the wooden railing as you stepped into the darkened passage. The light from the fire faded as you moved further away, and the darkness grew thicker, almost palpable. The smell of the forest outside grew stronger the further you walked, mingling with the scent of something old, dusty, forgotten. A soft sound reached your ears. Footsteps? No, it was too faint for that. It was more like the soft rustling of fabric. Something moving slowly, deliberately. You paused, holding your breath, straining to hear. But there was nothing. The sound had stopped. Just as you were about to take another step, a sudden flash of light pierced the darkness. A bolt of lightning illuminated the hallway in a blinding flash, revealing a door at the end of the corridor. It was ajar, just like the one you had seen earlier. The faintest hint of movement from behind the door caught your attention. Your heart raced, and a cold sweat broke out on the back of your neck. Every instinct told you to turn back, to leave, but something, curiosity, fear, drove you forward. You reached the door, the old wood groaning as you pushed it open. The room beyond was small, tucked away at the very back of the lodge. It seemed to have been untouched for years. Dust covered every surface, the windows dark with grime, the furniture draped in heavy white sheets. But there, in the center of the room, was a single chair. A wooden chair, its seat worn with age, its legs scratched and stained. But what truly caught your attention was the shape on the seat. A coat. It was dark and weathered, like it had been left there long ago. You stepped closer, your eyes narrowing. There was something about it, something off. As you reached out to touch the fabric, the door behind you slammed shut. The sound was deafening, as though the very walls of the lodge had closed in on you. You spun around, heart pounding, your breath coming in quick gasps. But there was no one there. Just the rain pounding against the windows and the oppressive silence that seemed to fill the room. And yet, you could feel it. Someone, or something, was watching. The door behind you had slammed shut with a force that reverberated in your chest, like a clap of thunder. You stood frozen, heart pounding in your ears. The coat on the chair seemed to beckon you, its dark fabric almost moving in the dim light, though there was no breeze to stir it. You couldn't tear your gaze away from it, as if the coat held a secret, a memory, or perhaps a warning. You reached for the doorknob, your fingers trembling as you turned it. It resisted, as though something invisible had sealed it shut from the other side. Panic clawed at your throat, but you fought it down. You had to stay calm. The firelight flickered in the distance, casting long shadows across the floor, but the room itself remained cold, the air growing heavier with each passing second. You could feel the weight of the silence pressing against you, and it felt suffocating. The very walls seemed to close in, their dark wood soaking up the warmth and the light, leaving only the creeping cold of the storm outside. You moved closer to the coat, feeling an inexplicable pull. With each step, your breath became shallower, and the hairs on the back of your neck stood on end. There was something in this room, something ancient and restless, and it had no intention of letting you leave. Your hand hovered over the coat, your fingers just inches from touching the worn fabric. It looked like it had been left there in haste, but how long ago? Days? Weeks? Or had it been years, forgotten and left to rot in the darkness? Suddenly, the hairs on your arms stood straight up. The sound of a faint whisper echoed through the room, so soft that you almost thought you had imagined it. You froze, holding your breath, listening intently. The whisper came again, this time more distinct, as though it were right beside you, as if someone, or something, was standing just over your shoulder, breathing down your neck. "Don't touch it," the voice murmured, barely audible, yet sharp enough to send a jolt of ice through your spine. You spun around, your heart racing, but the room was empty. There was no one there. No shadowy figure, no hidden presence, just the eerie silence that clung to the corners like a sickness. "Who's there?" you demanded, your voice shaking. The whisper had been so close, so real. You had to be hearing things, the isolation, the storm, the lodge itself playing tricks on your mind. There was no answer. Only the slow, steady sound of the rain, tapping against the windows as if it had always been there. Your eyes darted back to the coat, your mind screaming at you to leave it alone, to turn and flee, but something rooted you to the spot. It was like a compulsion, a force beyond your control, pulling you toward it. You reached out, your fingers brushing against the dark fabric. The moment your skin made contact, the room seemed to shift. A heavy pressure settled over your chest, as though the very air had thickened, pressing against you. The firelight flickered violently, casting the room in strange, jagged shadows that twisted and danced like ghosts in the corners. And then you felt it. A cold hand, icy, clammy, and unnatural, wrapped around your wrist, pulling you back. You gasped, trying to pull free, but the grip tightened, the fingers digging into your skin with an unsettling strength. The air grew colder, and the room seemed to stretch, the shadows twisting and growing, pulling at the edges of your vision. The whispers came again, louder this time, a chorus of voices, all speaking at once. Don't take it, leave now." The grip on your wrist tightened further, dragging you toward the chair as if something, or someone, wanted you to sit. But the force behind it wasn't human. It was cold, relentless, and ancient, like the forest itself was reaching out to claim you. You wrenched your arm free, stumbling back against the door. Your breath came in sharp, panicked gasps, your heart racing faster than it ever had before. The fire crackled in the distance, its warm glow a cruel contrast to the chill now settling over the room. The lodge had transformed in an instant from a place of refuge to a prison, its very walls now closing in on you, its dark corners filled with the eyes of things that shouldn't be. You turned, reaching for the doorknob again, but it wouldn't budge. The door was locked now, though you hadn't touched it. You slammed your shoulder against it, trying to force it open, but it refused to yield. It was as if the lodge itself had sealed you inside, trapping you with the darkness and the whispers that filled the air. "Leave now," the voices hissed, growing more frantic, more desperate. "Before it's too late." With shaking hands, you fumbled for your phone, hoping. No, praying that there would be a signal, some way to reach the outside world, but the screen remained dark, the absence of connection as suffocating as the silence around you. A low groan reverberated through the walls of the lodge, so deep it seemed to come from the very foundation itself. The sound was a warning, a growl from the dark places that lingered in the corners of the earth. And then a soft voice, clear and deliberate, spoke directly into your ear. "You shouldn't have come." The words sent a chill straight to your bones. You spun around, but once again there was nothing. The room was empty, silent, save for the relentless pounding of the rain on the windows. You could hear your heartbeat in your ears, the sound so loud it nearly drowned out everything else. The lodge had come alive. Its very walls seemed to watch you now, every creak of wood and crackle of the fire a reminder that you were no longer alone. You were never meant to be here. A flash of lightning lit up the room, casting everything into stark relief for a split second. And in that brief moment you saw it. In the mirror on the far wall, a figure stood behind you. A tall, shadowy shape, its features indistinct but unmistakable, was watching you. Its eyes were black, empty sockets that seemed to swallow the light around them. You couldn't move. You couldn't breathe. You were frozen in place, caught in the gaze of something that shouldn't exist. And then, as the storm raged on outside, the figure reached out toward you, its hands stretching long and thin, fingers curling like claws. The figure in the mirror seemed to stretch impossibly, its form twisting like smoke, yet remaining clear in its presence. A dark shape, a shadow that defied the rules of space and time. The air in the room seemed to freeze, thick with an ancient coldness, and for a long, breathless moment, you could do nothing but stare at the reflection, watching, helpless. Its hand inched closer, inch by inch, fingers curling toward you like a predator sensing its prey. You couldn't move. Your body felt weighted, as though the very room was holding you captive. The mirror's surface rippled like water, and the reflection of the figure warped, its body bending and distorting in ways that should not have been possible. It was as though it were trying to reach out, through the mirror, through the boundaries of reality itself. A sudden, sharp pain in your chest broke the paralysis. You gasped, your hand flying to your heart as though something inside you was being pulled, tugged, as if the figure's presence was sinking into you, into your very soul. You stumbled backward, tripping over your feet, and crashed into the wall with a dull thud. The coldness continued to seep into your bones, and the whispers returned, louder now, as if 1,000 voices were crying out in unison, pleading, warning. Leave, leave, before it wakes. The voice, once soft and distant, now echoed in your mind, reverberating through your skull like 1,000 screams. The walls, the floor, the very air seemed to pulsate with an energy you couldn't understand. The shadowy figure in the mirror grew more defined, its outline sharpening as it reached for you. Its eyes were like 2 empty pits, voids that seemed to consume all the light around them. The air in the room was thick with a musty, decaying smell now, like rotting wood and damp earth. It clung to your skin, to your clothes, as though you had stepped into a grave that had been forgotten for centuries. Without thinking, you turned and bolted toward the door. You threw your weight against it again, your shoulder slamming into the wood with all your strength. But the door didn't give. It didn't budge. The room was sealed, the shadows and the cold pressing in on you, tightening their grip like an invisible noose. Your mind raced. There had to be a way out. There had to be something you were missing, something you hadn't seen. But the figure in the mirror, no, it wasn't just in the mirror anymore. Its presence had invaded the room, a living, breathing thing. You spun around, desperate, looking for any escape, and that's when you saw it. In the farthest corner of the room, partially obscured by shadows, stood an old, ornate chest. It was ancient, its surface carved with intricate symbols you didn't recognize, each one twisted and contorted in ways that made your skin crawl. It looked out of place, as though it didn't belong in this lodge, in this time, or in this world. The whispers were getting louder now, the voices almost frantic, as if the chest were calling to you. You hesitated, but something pulled at you, something deeper than fear, urging you to open it. The figure in the mirror, the one behind you, let out a soft, almost imperceptible laugh. The sound was dry, like the rustling of dead leaves, and it was enough to send a fresh wave of terror through you. You had to act. You had to do something. You moved toward the chest, your legs shaky, your feet unsteady. The whispers grew louder, now mixed with soft, frantic pleading. Please, you must not. It will be too late. Leave, before the awakening. But it was as if the voices didn't matter anymore. You reached the chest, your hands shaking as you slowly lifted the lid. It creaked open with an unsettling sound, a sound that seemed to echo from the depths of the lodge itself, as if the chest were connected to something far older and more sinister than this place. Inside the chest was a bundle of old, tattered cloth. You hesitated, your breath catching in your throat. There was a faint, unsettling pressure around you as you reached in and pulled the cloth free, unfolding it carefully. And there, nestled inside, was an object. A book. The book's cover was worn, its edges frayed with age, but the thing that drew your eye, your soul, was the symbol on its cover. It was a dark, intricate design, a series of interlocking circles and jagged lines that seemed to twist and writhe even in the dim light. The book's presence seemed to draw the room's shadows tighter, its dark energy pulsing through the air like a living thing. A chill ran down your spine as you stared at it. You had no idea what it was, but you knew deep down that this was what had been waiting for you. This was the reason you had been drawn here, to this forsaken lodge, to this forest that seemed to reject the world around it. A low, guttural growl sounded from behind you. You turned in time to see the figure in the mirror, no longer just a reflection, emerge from the glass. It wasn't a man, nor was it entirely human. It was something older, something that had been locked away, buried beneath time itself. Its face was a twisted mask of shadow, eyes black pits that seemed to suck in all the light around them. It was staring at you, and you felt its gaze pierce your very soul. The weight of it was unbearable, suffocating. You couldn't breathe under its gaze. Now, you've awakened it, the creature said, its voice raspy, ancient, and filled with a hunger that made your blood run cold. And then it moved. It was like a blur, a rush of shadows and darkness, surging toward you with a speed that defied reason. You barely had time to react, stumbling backward, the book clutched in your hands as you tried to scramble away. But the thing was faster than you could imagine, and its presence was overwhelming. It was too much. The air felt thick and suffocating. You couldn't escape the weight of the darkness, and you realized then, you had been brought here for a reason. The creature surged toward you, faster than anything should have been able to move. Its form was a shifting mass of shadows, indistinct and yet terrifyingly real. Its presence seemed to swallow the light around it, leaving only an oppressive, swirling blackness in its wake. The air was thick with its malevolent energy, and the temperature in the room dropped to an unbearable chill. You stumbled backward, the book still clutched tightly in your hands. The creature's face, if it could even be called that, was a grotesque mess of shifting darkness, a hollow mask with eyes that were empty pits of nothingness. Its mouth opened, revealing a gaping maw, filled with jagged teeth that seemed to grow longer with each passing moment. The whispers grew louder, now screaming in unison, their voices a cacophony of fear and warning. The walls of the room seemed to bend and warp as if they too were alive, closing in on you with an unnatural hunger. The ground beneath your feet vibrated, as if the very foundation of the lodge was trembling in fear. You were paralyzed with terror, unable to move, unable to scream. The creature reached out with elongated fingers, its claws gleaming in the dim light like the tips of knives, sharp and deadly. It was only a few feet away now, and you could feel the pull of its gaze, drawing you and luring you toward it. Then, with a sudden burst of clarity, you realized what you had to do. You couldn't let it touch you. You couldn't let it consume you. The book, it had to be the key. The moment you had touched it, the creature had appeared, and now it was trying to claim you. The thought surged through your mind like a flash of lightning. This book was bound to the creature. This lodge. This place. You had to stop it. Summoning every ounce of willpower you could muster, you thrust the book in front of you, holding it out like a shield. The creature recoiled, its shadowy form flickering for a moment as if it were confused by the motion, its hollow eyes narrowing in what could only be described as rage. Foolish, the creature rasped, its voice like the crackling of dead leaves in the wind. You think you can stop me? You are mine now. You have freed me. And there is no going back. The shadows surrounding the room seemed to stir, reacting to its words. The floor beneath your feet groaned as if it were alive, and the walls shuddered. The air grew heavy with the scent of damp earth, the kind you might find in a forgotten crypt. Every breath you took was filled with the staleness of decay, the taste of death hanging on your tongue. But you held firm. The book, you had to use the book. You knew it was your only hope. Without thinking, you flipped it open, the pages crackling with age. The text on the yellowed pages seemed to writhe and shift before your eyes, the words too ancient, too complex to fully comprehend. But one thing was clear, this book held power. It had the power to contain the creature, to banish it back to the darkness from which it came. The creature hissed as the pages began to glow with a faint, otherworldly light. Its form twisted violently, the darkness around it recoiling in pain, as though the book itself were burning it. It snarled, the sound guttural and animalistic, its clawed hands reaching for you, but it was too late. The light from the book grew brighter, filling the room, illuminating every corner, every shadow. The lodge seemed to groan, its timbers creaking under the strain of the energy now surging through it. The creature let out a low, bone-chilling cry, its form beginning to dissipate, breaking apart like smoke in the wind. But it wasn't gone. Not yet. The room shook with a force that rattled your bones. The shadows, those same shadows that had filled the lodge with their dark, oppressive weight, began to writhe, coiling around you like snakes, trying to pull you back into the dark. The fire in the hearth flickered wildly, the flames turning a sickly green, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The book was burning in your hands. The pages were turning to ash, the words disappearing before your eyes. But somehow, it felt like the book wasn't meant to be destroyed. It wasn't meant to be consumed, it was meant to contain. The book was a prison, and you had to seal the creature back inside. And oh, the creature screamed, its voice now a high-pitched shriek, desperate and filled with malice. You cannot imprison me again. I will return. I will return. With a final, explosive surge of energy, you slammed the book shut. The room went completely dark. For a moment, there was nothing. The pressure, the weight of the shadows, the sound of the creature's screams, they were gone. The world felt oddly still, as if time itself had stopped. And then the door to the room burst open. You stumbled back in shock, blinking into the dim hallway beyond. The rain outside had stopped. The storm had passed. The trees that had once pressed against the lodge's windows now stood still, their dark branches swaying gently in the breeze. The cold that had filled the room had vanished, and the oppressive silence had lifted. You stepped forward cautiously, the book now an empty husk in your hands. The pages were nothing but ashes, and the symbol on the cover had faded, leaving nothing behind but a faint scar in the shape of an ancient mark. It was over. The creature was gone. Or so you thought. As you stepped out into the hallway, a strange sensation settled over you. The air felt different, lighter. But as you passed by the doorway leading to the room, you saw something that made your heart stop. The figure was back. Not in the mirror this time. No, the figure was standing in the doorway, its shadow stretching out across the floor, its hollow eyes staring straight at you, still empty, still filled with nothingness. "You think you've won?" it whispered, its voice cold and devoid of emotion. "This place is mine. It was never meant to be left behind. You cannot escape what you've unleashed." Your blood ran cold. The creature was still here. It had never truly left. And then, as quickly as it had appeared, the figure faded into the shadows, vanishing as though it had never been there at all. You were alone. But were you? The silence that followed was suffocating. Every breath you took felt unnatural, like the air itself was thick with the weight of something unsaid. The dark figure had vanished into the shadows, but you couldn't shake the feeling that it hadn't truly gone. It lingered, hiding just out of reach, waiting for the right moment to strike. Your heart was still pounding in your chest as you moved down the hallway, the floorboards creaking beneath your feet with each step. The eerie calm that had settled over the lodge felt wrong. There was no longer the oppressive weight of the creature's presence, no more whispering voices clawing at the edges of your mind, but something about the emptiness felt just as dangerous. You couldn't explain it, but the lodge itself felt different. It had changed. The once cozy, rustic feel of the place now seemed foreign, like an abandoned house forgotten by time. The walls groaned, the old wood bending and stretching, as if something inside the very foundation was awakening. The familiar scent of burning wood that had once comforted you now felt stale, as though it had been left to rot. The windows, once damp and fogged from the storm, were clear now, their glass smooth and untouched. But even as you glanced outside, something was wrong. The trees stood still, their branches stiff and unnaturally rigid, as though they had been frozen in time. The sky above was a sickly shade of gray, thick clouds swirling in patterns that made no sense, constantly shifting as if the atmosphere itself was holding its breath. A distant sound echoed from deep within the lodge. A low thud, a muffled thumping. You stopped dead in your tracks, your ears straining to catch any further sound. The noise came again, louder this time, more distinct. Something, or someone, was moving inside the lodge. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't the rain, and it wasn't the storm. It was a physical presence, something that wasn't supposed to be there. The hairs on the back of your neck prickled, and an instinctual sense of danger surged through you. You weren't alone. The thumping continued, rhythmic and slow, coming from upstairs. Without thinking, you moved toward the stairs. You didn't know why, there was no reason to follow the sound. But something inside you compelled you, a desperate need to uncover what was happening. You had already come this far. What was one more step into the unknown? The staircase creaked under your weight as you ascended, each step feeling like a silent countdown. The walls around you were closed in, pressing tighter with each upward movement, the air growing heavier, more oppressive. The strange noises continued from above, becoming clearer the closer you got, scraping, dragging, as if something was being dragged across the floor. At the top of the stairs, the hallway stretched out before you like a labyrinth. The dim light from the hearth below barely reached this far, and the shadows seemed to swallow everything in their path. The thumping grew louder, accompanied by a faint scratching sound, like claws scraping against wood. Your breath hitched in your throat as you followed the sound, walking down the hallway toward the last room at the far end. The door was slightly ajar, the old wood groaning with the wind. The doorframe was cracked, and the air beyond it seemed colder, more stifling than anywhere else in the lodge. With a deep breath, you pushed the door open. The sight that met you stopped your heart. The room was in complete disarray, furniture overturned, curtains ripped from their rods, and an old rocking chair that creaked back and forth as if it had been in constant motion. But it was the walls that caught your attention. Scratches. Deep, frantic gouges marred the once pristine wood. They ran in wild, erratic patterns, like a desperate hand had tried to claw its way out, leaving trails of broken paint and splintered wood. The very air in the room seemed to shimmer with a strange energy, as though it had been charged by some malevolent force. And there, in the center of the room, was the thing that had been making the noise. The creature. But it wasn't the same as before. No, this was different. It was now crouched low to the ground, its limbs twisted at unnatural angles, as if it had once been human but had been contorted by something far darker. Its face, if it could even be called that, was a twisted mockery of humanity, with features shifting in and out of focus. Its eyes were now wide, hollow pits, gaping and empty, but they glowed with an unnatural light, a sickly yellow that seemed to burn with fury. Its long fingers scratched at the floor, leaving deep gouges in the wood, as if it were trying to burrow into the very heart of the lodge. The air in the room was thick with a foul, putrid stench, something rotten and decayed, like the smell of something that had been buried for far too long. For a moment it didn't notice you. It continued its erratic movements, its body trembling with violent spasms. The thing was trapped in its own madness, unaware of your presence. But you knew that wouldn't last. You had seen its true form before. The creature was no longer just a shadow. It was here in front of you, fully materialized, born from the very fabric of the lodge. And it was angry. Before you could move, it froze, its head jerking up with a sharp, jerking motion. Its eyes, those hollow, soulless pits, locked onto you with a ferocity that made your blood run cold. The room seemed to pulse, the air thickening with malevolence as the creature's lips curled into a grotesque, twisted smile. Its mouth was wide, too wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth that gleamed in the dim light. "You," it hissed, its voice like the grinding of metal against stone. "You have awakened me, but now you will never leave." The walls groaned again, the lodge itself seeming to pulse with the creature's power. The ground beneath your feet vibrated as if something below was stirring, something ancient, something buried. The very foundations of the lodge were coming alive, and with them, the terrible, suffocating presence of the thing before you. You knew then that it wasn't just the creature you had to worry about. The lodge itself had been cursed long before you had arrived. This place was a prison, a trap designed to contain something far darker, something that had been sealed away for centuries. And now it was free. With one swift movement, the creature lunged toward you. Its body contorted, its limbs unnaturally long and thin, stretching far beyond what should have been possible. The claws on its hands scraped the floor as it moved with blinding speed, closing the distance between you and a heartbeat. But you weren't going to die here. You couldn't. You threw yourself to the side, narrowly avoiding its grasp, and crashed into the opposite wall. The air around you crackled with energy, and the shadows seemed to close in, wrapping around you, pressing against you like an invisible hand. The creature growled, its sharp teeth glinting in the dim light. It wasn't going to let you escape. You had to find a way out of this room, out of the lodge, before it was too late. But where would you go? The creature's growl reverberated through your chest, a deep, guttural sound that rattled your very bones. The walls seemed to close in on you, the air so thick with tension that it felt as though the lodge itself were alive, suffocating, watching, waiting. The creature's form twisted unnaturally, its long limbs bending and stretching in ways that defied reason. Its eyes, black and hollow, gleamed with a terrifying hunger that sent a jolt of ice down your spine. You couldn't move. You couldn't breathe. Every instinct screamed at you to run, to escape, but your legs felt heavy as though they were trapped in thick mud. The creature's gaze fixed on you, and for a moment, you saw something that made your heart stop. It wasn't just anger that burned in those empty eyes. There was something else. Something deeper, more ancient. A darkness that stretched beyond the walls of the lodge, beyond the very earth itself. Neil, I'd always known you. You think you can escape me? The creature rasped, its voice like dry leaves rustling in the wind. It was a sound you could feel in your very soul, a whisper that dug deep into the marrow of your bones. I am not a simple thing. I am the hunger, the rot, the very heart of this place. You have set me free, and now, you will never leave. The room seemed to darken, the shadows thickening as if they were being drawn in by the creature's very presence. The ground beneath you shook, a low rumble reverberating through the floorboards. The walls groaned in protest, as if the lodge itself were protesting the intrusion of this ancient evil. The air was so cold now, so biting, it felt like it was slicing through your skin, numbing you with its chill. You had to get out. You had to find a way. With a sudden, desperate surge of energy, you pushed yourself up from the floor, stumbling backward, your hands pressed against the walls for support. The creature's screech of rage echoed behind you as you backed toward the door, your mind racing, every nerve in your body screaming for escape. The door was the way out. You could reach it. You could. The ground beneath you gave way with a sickening crack. The floorboards split open, yawning wide like a mouth ready to swallow you whole. You gasped, trying to regain your balance, but the force of the tremor threw you off your feet. You fell hard, your body slamming against the cold wooden floor, the pain shooting through your ribs. The air around you grew thick with something foul. A putrid stench filled your nostrils, making you gag. The creature was close now, too close. You could hear it moving, its claws scraping across the floor, its breath hot and ragged, like the wind through a hollow tree. You turned, desperate to escape the jaws of whatever hell had opened up beneath you. Your hands scrambled across the floor, grabbing at anything to pull yourself up. The floor was slick with something wet, something cold and unnatural. It felt like blood. It smelled like death. You glanced back. The creature was hovering over you now, its body hanging suspended in the air, limbs twisted at strange angles. Its eyes burned with an unnatural glow as it moved closer, inch by inch, dragging itself through the air like a spider hunting its prey. Its mouth opened wide, its jagged teeth glinting in the low light. "Do you understand now?" it croaked. "This place was never meant to be forgotten. You think the lodge is a prison. But no, you are the prisoner." The words hit you like a wave of ice. You had been drawn here for a reason. This lodge, this cursed place, had been waiting for you. But why? What was it about you that had awakened this ancient force? What had it seen in you? The creature loomed over you, its shadow casting a blanket of darkness across your face, suffocating you, stealing your breath. Its claws reached for you, long and sharp, but suddenly you had an idea. The book. The thing that had opened this doorway, the thing that had summoned it. The book had to be more than just a trap. It had to be a key, something that could lock the creature away once more. But it was gone. The book had been reduced to ash, its pages crumbling into dust. There was nothing left to stop it. But maybe there was something else. In the back of your mind, a thought flickered, something that had been buried beneath the weight of your fear. A memory. The symbols you had seen on the book, those twisted, ancient designs. They weren't random. They were part of something older, something hidden beneath the surface of the lodge. The creature didn't just inhabit this place, it was this place. It was tied to it, bound to it, as if it had been sealed in the very foundations of the lodge itself. You had to find the heart of the lodge. You had to find the source of its power. With a forceful, desperate surge, you pushed yourself upright, staggering toward the back of the room. The creature screeched in fury behind you, but you couldn't afford to stop. The walls seemed to close in as you ran, the shadows reaching for you, the floorboards cracking beneath your weight. You felt the lodge tremble again, a deep, rumbling growl emanating from beneath the floor, as though something ancient and buried was waking up. You reached the far wall where an old, rusted door stood. It was small, almost hidden, covered by layers of dust and cobwebs. The door seemed insignificant compared to the grand halls and rooms of the lodge, but there was something about it that called to you. You grabbed the handle and with a sudden burst of strength, yanked it open. What you found inside was not just another room, it was the heart of the lodge. The walls were covered in strange, cryptic symbols, carved deep into the stone. The air here was cold, freezing, the temperature plummeting as you stepped inside. In the center of the room was a stone altar, covered in moss and vines, as if it had been forgotten by time itself. The ground around it was stained, dark, old stains that had soaked into the stone like blood. The very air seemed to hum with energy, as though something ancient and powerful had been waiting for you to unlock it. The creature's voice echoed behind you, distant now, filled with fury. "You think you can stop me?" it hissed. "This place is my domain. You have no idea what you are playing with." But you didn't stop. You couldn't. You stepped forward, placing your hand on the altar, and the moment your skin made contact, a pulse of energy surged through your body. The symbols on the walls began to glow, faint lines of light tracing their paths through the dark stone. The lodge shook once more, this time in violent protest. The floor beneath you trembled as if the very foundation of the building were coming apart. The creature screamed. What was happening? You had opened something, unleashed something far older than you had ever realized. But now you had to seal it back. You had to trap it. You reached down, your fingers brushing against a deep groove in the stone, a hidden symbol, a circle, a mark you had seen before, etched into the cover of the book. You placed your hand on it, and the world around you seemed to collapse. The moment your hand made contact with the deep, carved circle, the entire room seemed to explode in a blinding flash of light. The air around you crackled with raw, ancient energy, and the ground beneath your feet trembled violently, as if the very foundations of the lodge were groaning in protest, shaking in response to your action. The symbols on the walls, those dark and cryptic runes, flared to life in a brilliant glow, pulsing like the heartbeat of some long-forgotten entity that had slumbered beneath the earth for eons. A deafening roar filled your ears, so loud it seemed to come from within your skull. It was the creature, the thing that had been bound to this place for centuries, its screams of rage and despair now vibrating through the very fabric of the lodge. Its voice was no longer a whisper, no longer distant. It was all-encompassing, a guttural deep sound that shook your bones and rattled your teeth. "And no," the creature howled, its voice distorted, bending and warping in a terrifying cacophony of sound. "You cannot control it. You do not understand. This is my domain. I am the darkness that lives within it, the heart that beats at the core of this place." The light in the room grew unbearable, and your hand was nearly burned by the pulsing energy that now surged through the stone. The symbols on the walls seemed to writhe and twist, as if they were alive, shifting in a desperate attempt to break free from their ancient prison. The walls themselves groaned and cracked, sending dust and debris falling from the ceiling, but you didn't dare let go. This was the only way to stop it. The ground under you buckled again, and for a moment you thought the entire lodge would collapse. The ceiling above groaned and shifted, and the door you had come through slammed shut with a force that rattled the walls. You were trapped, locked inside with the creature, the very essence of the lodge itself, and whatever power lay within the altar beneath your palm. Do you think you can undo what has already been done? The creature's voice rang out again, a twisted laugh following its words. It was mocking you now, cruel and bitter. You are nothing but a fool. You have only sealed your fate. You gritted your teeth and pushed harder, feeling the surge of power from the altar pulse through your arm, into your chest, deep into the core of your being. The stone under your fingers felt alive, as though it was feeding off your fear, your desperation. The very essence of the lodge, this ancient, cursed place, was connected to the creature. It was the place's heart. The creature was the lodge, and the lodge was the creature. They were one. And now you were attempting to tear them apart. The roar intensified, the sound vibrating through your chest. The very air seemed to be alive with the creature's fury, and you could feel its presence pressing against your mind, clawing at your thoughts, trying to break through the barrier of your consciousness. The walls around you began to warp, bending and distorting, as though the lodge itself were unraveling, each corner dissolving into a black, liquid void. You could feel the temperature drop sharply as the shadows deepened, stretching and pulling around you like cold fingers. The darkness, the entity, was trying to claw its way into your mind. For a moment you saw it. In the shadows, a figure, no, a silhouette, moved, its shape shifting like smoke in the dim light. It wasn't the creature. This was something else. A presence, ancient and terrifying, something that had existed long before the lodge itself had been built. It had always been here, waiting, watching. A being that was neither alive nor dead, a thing born from the void that existed beyond time and space. It was the true master of this place, the heart of the curse that had consumed it. The figure stepped forward, and as it did, the world around you seemed to break apart. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, everything was being consumed by a vast, black abyss that stretched beyond the limits of your vision. The shadows reached out, stretching toward you, pulling at your skin, at your very soul. The figure loomed over you, its form indistinct, its face hidden beneath the swirling mass of darkness. You gasped, struggling to breathe as the void surrounded you, choking the very life out of you. The presence was overwhelming, suffocating. It was as if the weight of an entire universe rested upon your shoulders, crushing you with its force. Foolish mortal, the figure's voice rasped, a deep, guttural sound that reverberated through every cell of your body. You have disturbed something that was never meant to be disturbed. The lodge is but a reflection of me, and now you have drawn me into the world of the living. You have broken the boundary, and now there is no going back. The figure extended its hand, and with a wave, the shadows writhed, pulling you off your feet, dragging you toward the dark pit at the center of the room. The walls seemed to close in around you as the air grew colder, sharper, and more suffocating with each passing second. You were falling into an abyss of infinite darkness. You had failed. There was no escape. The creature, the entity, had won. But then the room went still. The shadows froze in place, suspended in the air like a haunting statue. The temperature shifted, the cold receding slightly, replaced by a faint warmth. The darkness that had swallowed the walls began to contract, retreating into the altar. The pulse of energy in the stone beneath your hand slowed, then stopped entirely. For a brief moment, there was complete silence. A breath. The stone under your palm flickered, just a faint spark of light. It grew, expanding rapidly, spreading out in waves that engulfed the entire room. The symbols on the walls burned with intensity, bright enough to blind you, their lines glowing with an otherworldly energy. The air seemed to hum with power. And then, silence again. The altar fell completely still, its pulsing energy extinguished. The shadows that had surrounded you disappeared, and the oppressive weight that had pressed down on your chest lifted, leaving an eerie calm in its wake. You pulled your hand back from the altar, your skin stinging as though it had been burned. The room around you was unchanged, but you could feel the presence of the entity still lingering. Its dark energy was woven into the very fabric of the lodge. It had been sealed, but you knew it was not gone. Not entirely. You looked around, taking in the room for what felt like the first time. The altar, now inert, sat in the center like a forgotten monument. The walls were covered in strange symbols, but they no longer pulsed with the same malefic energy. The air was thick with a heavy silence, a silence that seemed to echo the weight of 1,000 years of history, of curses, and of ancient power. But then a low whisper brushed against your ear, like the faintest breath of wind. "You think you've won?" The voice was familiar. It was the creature's voice. "You think you've sealed me away, but you have merely delayed the inevitable. This place is mine, and so are you." You spun around, your heart racing, but there was nothing but the stillness of the room. The presence was gone, but you felt it, like a cold shadow lingering just at the edge of your senses, waiting to return. And you realized then, with a sinking feeling in your stomach, that this wasn't over. The stillness of the room felt wrong. The oppressive silence that had settled over the altar was more than just a lack of sound. It was a weight, a vacuum, as if the very air had been sucked from the lodge, leaving only an empty void behind. The echoes of the creature's voice still lingered in your mind, haunting, like a whisper you couldn't shake. "You have merely delayed the inevitable," it had said. Delayed. Not stopped. Not sealed. Delayed. A shiver ran through your spine as you tried to steady your breath. You stepped back slowly, eyes darting around the room, expecting to see the walls close in, the shadows coming alive again, but nothing happened. The symbols on the walls had stopped glowing, their intricate patterns now dull and lifeless. The room, once filled with an overwhelming power, now felt hollow, abandoned. Yet you couldn't shake the sense that something was wrong. Something was still waiting, hidden beneath the surface of the lodge, beneath the very earth it stood on. You turned toward the door, a desperate need to escape driving you, but when you reached for the handle, a sudden weight settled over your chest. The air was thick again, suffocating. The door, once sturdy and solid, now felt wrong. You tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. It was as though the lodge itself was holding you inside, preventing your escape, as if it were aware of your attempt to leave. A deep rumble filled the room, low and vibrating, like a heartbeat that came from the very bones of the lodge. The floor beneath your feet shifted, and you stumbled, barely catching yourself against the wall. The shaking intensified, the sound of shifting earth becoming louder and louder until it seemed to fill every inch of the room. The very structure of the lodge was groaning in agony, as if it were alive, struggling against something that had been disturbed, something that had been awakened. The walls started to crack, thin fractures appearing like veins spreading through the stone. The ground cracked open beneath you, and you instinctively jumped back. The fissures spread, crawling like dark, hungry mouths, swallowing the very light of the room. The lodge was shaking again, but this time the tremors weren't random. They were rhythmic, synchronized, like a pulse. A heartbeat. The heartbeat of something ancient and monstrous, something buried so deep beneath the ground that it had been forgotten by time. But now it was stirring, waking up. You knew in the deepest corner of your mind that this was not over. The creature hadn't been sealed, it had only been momentarily suppressed. The lodge was alive with its energy, its rage, its hunger. The very foundation of this place was tied to the entity. And now that connection had been reawakened, and the lodge, itself, was beginning to react. The ground split open beneath you, and the floorboards groaned like an old man in pain. A sharp crack rang out as the stone altar in the center of the room shifted, sliding away from its place like a great tombstone being rolled aside. Beneath it, there was nothing but darkness, a hole that seemed to stretch downward into an abyss, a gaping maw that threatened to swallow everything in its path. The tremors intensified. The walls buckled and groaned as if the lodge was collapsing inward on itself. The air thickened again, the oppressive presence of the creature filling the space, pushing in from all sides. The darkness in the hole beneath the altar grew deeper, and you could feel it. A presence, ancient and vast, like a shadow stretching out from the earth itself. You backed away, heart racing, as the whispers began again. This time they weren't just faint murmurs, they were loud, clear, and frantic. They clawed at your mind, dragging you down into the darkness. Words you couldn't understand, voices that grew louder and louder until they filled every corner of your consciousness. It has begun. You cannot stop it. The path to the hollowing is open. The heart of the lodge has awakened. The floor beneath your feet buckled again, and the ground split wider. You staggered back, eyes wide with terror. The abyss below seemed to grow larger, as though it was swallowing the very room whole. The shadows that had been receding now surged forward, curling like smoke, twisting and writhing in every corner of the room. The air felt charged, like the electricity before a storm, and the pressure in your chest mounted, squeezing tighter with every second. You turned to flee, but the room was no longer the room you had entered. The walls had shifted, twisted, warped. The hallway outside, the one you had entered from, was gone. In its place, there was only a void, an endless stretch of shadow. The air was thick with the stench of decay, of something old, rotting, and it filled your lungs as you gasped for breath. The whispers grew louder. The voices were no longer just distant murmurs, but full-bodied screams. A chorus of voices crying out in agony, in terror, as though they had been trapped in this very place for centuries. The Halloween is coming. The curse is not finished. The forest, the fire, you cannot escape it. You belong to the lodge now. Forever. The walls cracked again, and this time they didn't stop. The stone splintered and crumbled, revealing what lay beneath. A vast, dark cavern stretching out beneath the lodge, an underground network of tunnels and chambers that seemed to go on forever. The creature's presence filled the space, heavy and suffocating. It was no longer just an entity trapped in the lodge, it was the very foundation of the lodge itself, and the lodge was now crumbling, fracturing, breaking apart. You couldn't breathe. A sudden realization hit you. This wasn't just the creature. This was the lodge itself. The structure, the earth, the stone, it had been built atop something far darker, something ancient, a power older than the forest, older than the very land on which it stood. And now that power had been awoken. The shadows surged forward, closing in on you from all sides. The ground cracked wider, and you were being drawn toward the abyss below. The air was thick with the power of the lodge, the curse that had been buried for centuries. The darkness reached out for you like a hand, like 1,000 fingers, pulling you closer to the edge of the void. You cannot escape. The voice was inside your head now, inside your soul. It was everywhere. The creature, the entity, the very lodge itself, it was all one, and you had awakened it. And now there was no turning back. The abyss beneath you seemed to open wider, the darkness below growing deeper, more profound. It was as if the ground itself were giving way, a yawning mouth of shadow threatening to swallow you whole. The whispers, frantic and desperate, filled your mind, curling through your thoughts like tendrils of cold smoke. You could hear them more clearly now, each voice distinct and filled with terror, their words lost in the chaos of your fear. The Halloween calls. You cannot escape what has already been born. It is too late. The weight of the voices pressing in on you was unbearable, like an ocean of sound crashing over you, drowning you. You staggered backward, your legs weak beneath you, but the ground beneath you trembled again, and the floor seemed to shudder like a living thing. The walls around you groaned, bending in unnatural angles as if they were alive, breathing with the pulse of the lodge's curse. You turned, eyes darting to the door, but the hallway you had passed through was no longer there. The very structure of the lodge had shifted. The once familiar passageways had become a labyrinth of twisting corridors and jagged walls. The doors, the windows, they no longer made sense. Everything was distorted, like a house turned inside out, or a nightmare you couldn't wake up from. You will never leave, the voice whispered again, this time closer, inside your ear, a cold breath against your skin. The Halloween is here, and you have opened the door. You spun around, trying to make sense of what was happening, but all you saw was the unending darkness. The cracks in the floor stretched wider, swallowing the light, and the shadows grew thicker, more tangible, as if they were solidifying around you. The air was damp, the temperature plummeting again, and the stench of decay filled your nostrils, heavy and nauseating. The heartbeat of the lodge, its pulse, grew louder, faster, like the thundering rhythm of a great beast in pain. It was no longer just a rumble. It was a sound that reverberated through your body, a deep, thrumming vibration that made your chest ache with each beat. It was coming from below, from the very heart of the lodge, the dark, hollow center that had been buried and sealed for so long. It was awake now, alive. It is awakening, the voice whispered again, low and guttural. The Halloween has begun. You had to act. You had to stop it. You had to find a way out before the lodge consumed you, before it took you. But as you turned to flee, a sudden tremor shot through the ground beneath you, knocking you off your feet. You crashed to the floor, hands scraping against the cold, damp stone. The room spun around you, and for a moment, you thought the very walls were closing in. The lodge was alive. It was alive, and it was hungry. A sharp crack echoed through the room, and the altar in the center of the room, the one that had once held the secret to the creature's binding, shifted once more. This time, it moved with a force as if something was rising beneath it, pulling it away from the floor. The shadows that had once been mere silhouettes now writhed and twisted, taking on a life of their own. They reached for you, tendrils of darkness stretching out like long, skeletal fingers. The air felt heavier, thicker, as though something was pressing down on you from above, suffocating you, pulling you into the depths. The weight of the lodge's curse was growing, thickening the air with its power, its ancient, undying hunger. Your heart pounded in your chest, and your breath came in sharp, ragged gasps. There was no escape. The more you struggled, the more the lodge seemed to pull you back, like a living thing determined to keep you within its grasp. A sound echoed from deep within the earth, like the scraping of stone against stone, like something vast and ancient awakening from a long slumber. The very ground beneath you trembled again, this time with such force that the walls cracked and splintered. Dust and debris fell from the ceiling as the lodge itself seemed to convulse, a deep, groaning sound filling the air. And then, through the darkness, a shape began to emerge. It was at first barely a whisper of movement, a shifting shadow, growing and stretching, taking form. But then the shape became more solid, more distinct, and you realized with growing horror that it was not the creature you had seen before. This was something else. A figure. Tall and slender, its form twisted and elongated, its body made of darkness and void, its face hidden beneath the folds of shadow. The figure moved slowly toward you, its footsteps silent, but its presence crushing, suffocating. It was as though it was made of the very air, woven from the blackness that filled the room. Its eyes, if they could even be called that, were hollow, dark pits of nothingness, burning with an otherworldly light that seemed to draw you in. The whispers in your mind grew louder, more frantic. They were no longer just voices. They were thoughts. Your thoughts stolen from you. You could feel the pressure of them like claws scraping against your consciousness. You could feel them trying to take you, to consume you. "You have opened the door," the voice said again, the same words but now louder, stronger. It echoed in your mind, reverberating through your very being. "You cannot escape what is already inside you." The figure, whatever it was, continued its slow, deliberate advance. The shadows that trailed behind it seemed to have a life of their own, snaking across the floor like living tendrils, curling around your legs, pulling you deeper into the void. You tried to move, but your body wouldn't respond. You were paralyzed, frozen in place, unable to escape the grasp of the dark figure that approached. And then you realized the truth. This thing wasn't here to kill you. No, it was here for something far worse. It was here to take you, to claim you. And then there would be nothing left of you. Only an empty shell. A vessel for the curse that had festered in the heart of the lodge for so long. "You belong to the lodge now," the voice said, its words both cruel and triumphant. "You are one with the hollowing. The curse is in your veins. You cannot run. You cannot hide. You have already been claimed." A cold, sinking dread washed over you, deeper than anything you had ever felt before. The figure loomed closer, its presence pressing in on you, suffocating you. The shadows around you closed in tighter, swallowing you whole. This was it. There was no escape. The shadows pressed in tighter, their tendrils curling around your limbs, their cold, clammy fingers tightening with an unrelenting grip. Each breath you took felt heavier, as though the very air had thickened, suffused with the oppressive weight of the lodge's curse. The darkness that surrounded you seemed alive, growing, shifting in unnatural ways as the figure in front of you drew nearer. Its hollow eyes burned with an eerie light, searing into your soul, and every instinct screamed at you to run, to escape. But your legs wouldn't move. The shadows were too strong, too powerful, and your body was frozen in place, trapped in the dark, suffocating web of the lodge's malignant will. The figure that approached you, made of nothing but darkness and void, seemed to glide effortlessly across the floor, its form stretching and distorting like smoke caught in a windstorm. It was no longer merely an entity of shadows. It was something else. Something older. Something beyond comprehension. The whispers in your mind grew louder, closer, their voices now a cacophony of disjointed, distorted phrases. They had become a part of you, clawing at your thoughts, dragging your very essence into the depths of the darkness. You cannot fight it. You are part of the hollowing. The curse flows through your veins. There is no escape. The voice that had whispered before now began to take shape. It was not one voice, but 100. No, 1,000. Each voice distinct, each one a tortured soul, lost and broken, their cries rising in a chorus of despair. They filled your ears, filled your mind, overwhelming you with their pain. You could feel their suffering, their fear, as if their very torment had become your own. The figure loomed over you now, towering in the shadows, its presence pressing in on you like the crushing weight of an ancient tomb. You could see the faint outline of its face, if it could be called a face. It was a featureless mask, a blank canvas of darkness, its features obscured, yet somehow still radiating an overwhelming sense of malice and hunger. There was nothing human about it, nothing recognizable, only void and the abyss that it brought with it. Its hollow eyes flickered with light and the whispers ceased. The air grew still. For a brief moment, everything was silent. Then the figure spoke. "You have opened the door," But do you understand what you have unleashed? The words were like a thunderclap booming through your chest, rattling the very core of your being. The voice was not a simple whisper now. It was the roar of something ancient, something primal, the voice of the lodge itself, the voice of the very darkness you had awakened. It was alive. It was the curse, and it was speaking to you, its words reverberating in your mind like a storm. You think you have control, it continued, its voice now layered with a cold, mocking tone. You think you can resist the pull of the hollowing, but you are already part of it. You were always part of it. The words hit you like a physical blow. You could feel them sinking into your chest, into your heart, and a wave of dread washed over you. The realization began to dawn on you. This was not just a creature bound by the lodge. This was the lodge. This was the curse itself, the twisted soul of the forest, the earth, and the very bones of the building. The shadows were not separate. They were a part of it. The figure that stood before you was not just a manifestation of the creature. It was the manifestation of everything that had been buried beneath this cursed place, everything that had festered in the dark for centuries. And now you were its prisoner. The figure raised a hand, long skeletal fingers stretching out toward you. The air around you grew colder still, as if the temperature itself were dropping in response to its command. The shadows grew longer, more insistent, tightening their grip on your body, pulling you closer, and the pressure in your chest became unbearable. You could feel the life draining from you as if something was being ripped from the very core of your being. The whispers returned, louder now, more frantic. The hollowing is here, it is inside you. You are mine, you belong to me. The curse is endless, you are bound to it. The figure's voice broke through the cacophony of whispers, its tone cold and final. You will never leave. You will never be free. You are already a part of the hollowing. Your body convulsed as the shadows coiled tighter, their grip tightening with each passing second. Your breath was labored, your pulse quickening as the darkness pressed in on you from all sides. You could feel the pull of the abyss, the weight of the curse sinking deeper into your soul, and the pain, the overwhelming agony, of knowing that you were lost. There was no escape. The lodge had claimed you. The hollowing had claimed you. It is done, the figure whispered, its voice now a low, final murmur. There is no turning back. Suddenly, the ground beneath you cracked again, and a deep rumbling filled the air, as if the very earth were groaning in pain. The walls of the lodge trembled as the force of the curse surged through the structure, shaking it to its very foundations. The shadows that had held you captive began to pull back, retreating into the corners of the room, but their presence still lingered, thick and oppressive. The floor split open before you, revealing a gaping chasm that stretched far below, an endless, yawning pit of darkness that seemed to reach into infinity. The room began to dissolve, the walls crumbling away, revealing nothing but the endless void that lay beneath. You were falling. You had no choice but to fall. But then something changed. The air shifted again. It was no longer just the cold, suffocating presence of the curse. It was something else. A warmth. A light, faint but growing. It was a flicker of something that seemed to break through the darkness. It was as though something deep within you, something buried beneath the weight of the curse, had stirred. The whispers began to fade, their hold on your mind weakening. The figure, the manifestation of the lodge's curse, paused as if sensing the shift. It turned toward you, its hollow eyes narrowing, its form flickering with uncertainty. "What is this?" it hissed, its voice trembling with a strange mix of anger and fear. "You dare resist me?" You didn't have an answer, but you felt it. A surge of energy, of defiance, rising within you. It wasn't your own will. It was something older, something deeper, something tied to the very land, the very forest that surrounded the lodge. It was a force that had been buried for centuries, hidden beneath layers of darkness, but now it was rising. The lodge groaned again, this time in protest. The very bones of the building seemed to tremble, as if something deep within was fighting back, resisting the curse that had bound it for so long. And then, in the distance, you heard it, a faint sound, a whisper, but this time it was different. It wasn't a voice filled with agony or despair. It was a cry of hope. The figure before you recoiled as the walls of the lodge began to tremble more violently. The ground shook beneath you, and the shadows that had once been so solid began to flicker, dissipating like smoke in the wind. The hollowing was no longer in control, but neither were you. You were stuck in the middle, caught between two forces, two worlds. The lodge, the creature, the curse, they were not going to give up so easily. And now, something else was awakening. Something far older than you could comprehend. And the question was no longer whether you could escape the hollowing. It was whether you would become part of it, forever, or whether you would be consumed by it. The ground trembled again, more violently this time. The force was so powerful, so deep, it felt as though the very foundation of the earth was cracking beneath you. The walls groaned in protest, shifting and bending as if they were alive with the curse that had awakened inside the lodge. The shadows around you flickered, swirling like mist, dissipating and returning in a cycle of eternal conflict. The temperature plummeted, the air thick with an icy pressure that pressed in on your chest, making every breath feel like you were inhaling shards of glass. You felt it deep in your bones. The hollowing, the curse that had been buried for centuries, was not just a malevolent force. It was the heartbeat of this place, the core of the lodge. And now it was fighting for its survival, stretching its tendrils into every corner of your mind, every corner of the land. You could almost feel it, an ancient, all-consuming hunger that yearned to devour you, to claim you. And yet, somewhere deep inside, something stirred. It's not over. The thought flickered in your mind, as fragile as a candle flame in the wind, but it was enough. Enough to remind you that there was still a chance to escape, a chance to sever the connection. But how? How could you fight something that had existed for centuries, something that was as old as the very land itself? You tried to move. Your body was stiff, your limbs aching from the unrelenting pressure, but somehow you managed to stagger backward, toward the shattered remnants of the room. The altar was gone now, reduced to rubble and dust. The gaping chasm in the floor continued to widen, its darkness spreading, pulling everything around it into the depths. You couldn't see the bottom, only an infinite void that seemed to stretch beyond the limits of time and space. The shadows, thick and endless, crawled across the walls, flickering in the dim light like restless spirits. The air was thick with the stench of decay, of rot, but there was something else now. Something new. A light. Faint at first, but growing. A flicker in the farthest corner of the room, as though a candle had been lit, casting a soft, golden glow. It wasn't much, but it was enough to pierce through the darkness. Enough to remind you that there was something beyond this, something that had been hidden, buried beneath layers of shadow and time. The whispers had stopped. For a moment, there was only silence. The pounding of your heart, the ragged sound of your breathing, the thrum of the lodge's unnatural pulse. But then, softly, just on the edge of your hearing, you could make out a voice. A single voice, steady and calm. You are not alone. The voice was gentle, almost soothing, and yet there was a strength in it, a power that cut through the suffocating silence like a blade. The shadows seemed to shudder at the sound, recoiling as if they were afraid. The voice continued, its warmth spreading through the room like sunlight after a long storm. You are part of this land, part of its heart. The shadows, the curse, the hollowing itself, began to recoil as the light grew brighter. The walls around you trembled, the air shifted, and the pressure in your chest eased just a little, as if the force that had been pressing down on you was lifting, if only slightly. You could feel it now, a pull, a subtle but undeniable force drawing you toward the light. It wasn't the creature that controlled this place. Not anymore. It was something else. Something that had been here all along, something older than the curse itself. The light was a part of the land. A force that had been buried deep, hidden beneath the darkness, waiting for the right moment to rise. You staggered toward it, the light drawing you closer, guiding you through the chaos. Your movements were slow, your body heavy, but you pushed forward, step by agonizing step. The ground continued to shake, the darkness continued to swirl, but the light was a beacon, a promise of hope in the midst of the storm. The figure, the manifestation of the curse, had not moved. It remained still, watching you with its hollow eyes, its presence oppressive, suffocating. But there was something else now, something in its form that shifted, flickered like a flame caught in the wind. You cannot fight me, it rasped, its voice low but filled with a deep, primal rage. You cannot stop the hollowing. But you weren't listening anymore. You didn't need to listen. The light was growing, expanding, filling the room with warmth. You could feel it now deep inside you. The presence, the pull. This place is mine, the figure hissed. The forest is mine. The land is mine. You belong to it. Forever. But as its words echoed through the room, something in you snapped. The shadows around you writhed, retreating, pulling back as if they were afraid. The force that had held you captive, the curse, the hollowing, began to lose its grip slowly but undeniably. The warmth from the light seemed to grow stronger, more powerful, and the shadows began to shrivel in its presence, as though they could not withstand it. And then the ground beneath you cracked open again. But this time it wasn't the void that emerged. It wasn't the endless abyss of darkness. No, this time it was roots. Roots that had been buried for centuries. Roots that had been suppressed, hidden beneath the weight of the curse. began to emerge from the earth. Thick, gnarled roots, twisting and writhing, pushing through the floor, reaching upward toward the light. The walls groaned in protest, but the roots kept coming, tearing through the stone, wrapping themselves around the remnants of the lodge's structure. They were alive, alive with the essence of the land, the forest, the earth itself. The figure before you screeched in rage, its form flickering violently as if it were being torn apart. It reached out toward you with its long, skeletal fingers, but the roots closed around it, wrapping tightly, pulling it back, until its form dissolved into the darkness, fading from sight. And with its disappearance, the pressure in the room lifted completely. The walls of the lodge stopped trembling. The ground stopped shaking. The air grew still, calm, as though the very essence of the curse had been sucked away, drawn into the roots, consumed by them. The shadows began to fade, dissolving into nothing, leaving behind only the golden light that now bathed the room. The light was warm, steady, and it filled the space with a soft, reassuring glow, as if it had always been there, waiting for this moment to rise. And as you stood there, amidst the remnants of the lodge, the broken stone, and the shattered wood, you realized the truth. The curse was not something that could be defeated by force. It was not something that could be destroyed. It was a part of this land, part of its heart. But it could be transformed, could be reclaimed. The Hallowing had been defeated, but not by fighting it. You had accepted it. You had embraced the land, the forest, the roots. You had allowed the heart of the land to rise, to cleanse the darkness, to heal the wounds that had festered for so long. And in doing so, you had become part of it. The lodge, the curse, the creature, they were no longer bound to you. You were bound to them, yes, but in a way that was different now. You were part of the land, part of the cycle that had existed long before the lodge had ever been built. You had become one with the earth, with the forest, with the heartbeat of the Hallowing. And now the forest could breathe again. The light continued to grow, bathing the lodge in a warm, golden glow that pushed back the shadows and darkened corners. It filled the entire space with a quiet radiance, like dawn breaking after an endless night, spreading across every corner of the room. The air had shifted again, no longer suffocating, no longer heavy with the oppressive weight of the curse. It was now filled with the sweet scent of fresh earth, of rain-soaked leaves and ancient bark. The stench of rot and decay had vanished, replaced by the pure, fragrant aroma of life. You stood there, surrounded by the remnants of the lodge, your mind still reeling from the events that had unfolded in such a short time. The figure, the Hallowing, the curse, they had all faded, dissolved as if they had never been. The ground no longer cracked and trembled beneath your feet. The walls, though scarred and broken, no longer felt like they were closing in on you. Instead, the roots that had burst forth from the earth now pulsed with a quiet energy, their twisted forms intertwined like the veins of a living creature. They had become part of the land, part of you. The lodge was no longer the place it had once been. It had been reborn. A sudden gust of wind swept through the open space, a soft breath of air that carried with it the sound of rustling leaves. It was as if the trees themselves had begun to speak, their whispers weaving through the air, distant yet clear, like a melody played on the wind. The sound was gentle, soothing, like a lullaby that had echoed through the forest for centuries, waiting to be heard. You could feel the presence of the forest again, its ancient, living soul stretching beyond the lodge, far into the deep woods. The trees, the earth, the sky, they were all connected, tied together in a way that you had never fully understood until now. You were no longer just an observer, a visitor. You were a part of it, woven into the very fabric of the forest's being. For the first time, you could hear the whispers of the trees, no longer the desperate, frantic cries of the cursed land, but the calm, steady voice of the forest itself, its voice rich with wisdom and age. It spoke to you not with words, but with a deeper understanding, a knowing. "You have freed us," the trees whispered, their voices resonating deep in your chest. "You have opened the door, but you have also sealed it. You are part of the heart of this land, and it is part of you." The realization hit you like a wave. The curse that had once bound this place, the creature, the shadows, the Hallowing, was not an external force. It had been the expression of the land's suffering, the corruption of the balance between the living and the dead, the cycle of growth and decay that had been disrupted long ago. And now that balance had been restored. You had become a part of the forest, a part of the land, and in doing so, you had brought it back to life. The very trees that now whispered in the wind had witnessed centuries of pain and growth, of birth and death, their roots intertwining with the earth's heartbeat. And now you too were woven into that pulse, carried along by the flow of time itself. The Hallowing is gone, the trees continued, their voices like a soft rustle of leaves. The land is healing, but the forest must remain strong. It must grow. It must be protected. A feeling of deep peace washed over you. You could hear it in the trees, the promise of renewal, of something ancient and powerful, still beating within the heart of the forest. It was a promise of growth, of life that would endure for as long as the trees stood. The curse had been broken, yes, but it was not gone. The forest was still alive, and it would always remain that way so long as the balance was preserved. As you stood there, still surrounded by the crumbling remnants of the lodge, you felt a strange pull, a beckoning urging you to move. It was not a fear, but a call, one that came from deep within the heart of the forest. The roots beneath you seemed to hum with energy, as if they were calling you forward, drawing you toward the forest beyond the lodge. You turned, stepping cautiously toward the opening in the broken wall where the dark trees beyond beckoned, their twisted, gnarled branches reaching toward you. There was no need for hesitation now. The forest was no longer an entity to fear, but a living, breathing thing that had accepted you. You had become part of it, and it was a part of you. It was the pulse of life, the endless cycle of growth, death, and rebirth that sustained the land. And now, you were connected to it in ways you could never have imagined before. The wind picked up again, this time stronger, sending a flurry of leaves swirling around you. The soft, whispering voices of the trees grew louder, more insistent. You had not just broken the curse. You had become the bridge, the link, between the old world of darkness and the new world of light. The forest had been reborn, and now you were its guardian, its protector, its keeper. But as you stepped into the wild, untamed woods beyond the lodge, you felt the weight of your new role settle upon your shoulders. The land had been healed, yes, but there was still work to be done. The forest was vast, immense, and it would take time to restore it fully. The darkness that had once consumed it would never return, but new challenges would rise. The balance must be kept. The whisper of the trees was no longer a distant hum, but a presence, steady and resolute. The roots beneath you were more than just living tendrils of wood and soil. They were the pulse of the land, the ancient force that had existed before the curse, and they had accepted you. You had become part of that force, and now it was your duty to ensure that the forest continued to grow, to thrive. As you ventured deeper into the woods, the trees seemed to open up before you, their branches parting like a welcoming embrace. The light that had once bathed the lodge now filtered through the canopy above, casting long, dappled shadows on the forest floor. The air was thick with the scent of moss and earth, and the sound of rustling leaves filled your ears. The forest was alive, was breathing, and so were you. You had done it. You had defeated the curse. You had transformed the hollowing from a force of destruction into one of growth. The land would heal, and with it, the forest would rise again. But there was more to be done. The trees, their whispers now gentle but firm, guided you deeper into the heart of the forest, their roots twisting and turning beneath your feet, carrying you forward into the unknown. The balance has been restored, the trees murmured, but the work is never done. The forest must be protected. The hollowing will never return, but there will always be forces that seek to disrupt the balance. You must stand as its guardian. And so, with the weight of your new purpose heavy in your chest, you took the first step forward. You had become a part of the land, of the forest. And now, it was your responsibility to protect it, to ensure that its heart continued to beat, that its life continued to grow. The journey was just beginning. The trees stretched high above you, their branches intertwining like the hands of ancient gods, weaving a canopy so thick it seemed to swallow the sky. The light from the breaking dawn filtered through the gaps in the leaves, casting an ethereal glow across the forest floor. It was a sight you'd only seen in your dreams, an untouched, primordial wilderness, a place where the land breathed with life, ancient and eternal. The whispering voices of the trees surrounded you, their murmurs not in words but in sensations, in pulses of energy that seemed to vibrate through the air, through the earth itself. You could feel it deep within your chest, the steady rhythm of the forest's heartbeat, the pulse of life that flowed through every root, every leaf, every blade of grass. You took another step forward, the cool earth beneath your feet soft and yielding, like the land itself was welcoming you. The roots, thick and gnarled, stretched out across the path, as if guiding you deeper into the heart of the forest, where the air was thick with an ancient power that you could almost taste. The sense of damp moss, rich soil, and fresh pine filled your nostrils, grounding you in the moment. For the first time, you felt as though you truly belonged to this place, a part of the earth beneath your feet and the trees that towered above you. The hollowing was no more. The curse that had plagued the land for centuries had been washed away, cleansed, and now the forest stood in its renewed, sacred balance. But even in the peaceful serenity, you felt the weight of responsibility settle onto your shoulders. The forest, though now free from the grip of darkness, was not without its dangers. Life, in all its forms, was a cycle of birth and death, and the balance could be easily tipped once again. The land had accepted you as its guardian, its protector. The trees had whispered as much, their voices filling your mind with an understanding so deep it felt like it was woven into your very DNA. They had made you a part of them, a part of the forest's living, breathing pulse. The hollowing is gone, the trees whispered again, their voices more vivid, more grounded. But there will always be forces that seek to disrupt the peace. You must be its shield, its sword, and its soul. The words echoed in your mind, resonating with an ancient power that was both humbling and terrifying. You were not merely a witness to the forest's rebirth, you were its chosen protector, its guardian, its keeper. The path before you stretched endlessly, winding deeper into the heart of the woods. There were no roads here, no paths beaten by human feet. This was a place untouched by the hands of civilization. The forest was alive, self-sustaining, eternal. And yet, you knew that this place, though sacred, was not immune to the darkness that had once sought to consume it. There were things in the woods, creatures, forces, that had been here long before the curse, long before the lodge. Ancient forces that had slept beneath the surface, waiting for the right time to stir. You moved forward, following the winding path that seemed to lead you deeper into the core of the forest, toward the heart of the land. The trees parted slightly, revealing glimpses of something in the distance. A clearing bathed in golden light, where the air shimmered with a palpable energy. Something powerful was waiting for you there. You could feel it. As you drew closer, the light grew brighter, more intense, until it became nearly blinding. It wasn't the sunlight filtering through the trees, but something else, something ancient. The very air hummed with a power that felt both familiar and foreign, a force that seemed to call to you, beckoning you closer. Finally, you reached the clearing, and as you stepped into it, you stopped in your tracks. Before you stood a massive, gnarled tree, unlike anything you had ever seen. Its trunk was thick and twisted, its bark black as midnight, covered in intricate, glowing symbols. The roots of the tree stretched far out across the clearing, like a web of veins beneath the earth, feeding into the soil, into the very heart of the forest. The air around it crackled with energy, the kind of energy you had only ever felt in the presence of something truly ancient. This was the heart of the forest, the place where the true power of the land resided. The whispers of the trees grew louder now, resonating in your chest, vibrating with the rhythm of the ancient tree. Their voices were no longer just a murmur, they were strong, deep, as if they had always been with you, waiting for this moment. They spoke not just to your mind, but to your soul. This is the heart, they said, their voices a deep, melodic hum. The source of all life in this forest. The place where the land's pulse begins. And now, it is your duty to protect it, to guard it, for you are bound to it as it is bound to you. Your heart raced as the weight of their words settled upon you. This was no mere tree, it was the source of the forest's life, the very essence of its power. And now you were its keeper, its protector. You have broken the curse, the trees whispered, but the battle is never truly over. There are forces that will always seek to undo the balance. You must stand vigilant, for the heart will always be sought after. The hollowing may be gone, but there are others who will try to claim this power for their own. You took a step forward, drawn to the ancient tree. As you reached out to touch the dark, glowing bark, a surge of energy flowed through you. It was a rush of warmth and power, as though the very essence of the land was coursing through your veins, filling you with a deep, overwhelming connection to the forest. The tree seemed to breathe beneath your touch, as if it were alive, alive in a way that no human could fully comprehend. You could feel the pulse of the forest, its heartbeat echoing through the earth, through the roots that wound beneath you, through the air that filled your lungs. It was more than just a sensation, it was an experience, a feeling of belonging that filled you with both awe and terror. The forest was not just a place. It was a living, breathing entity that had existed long before the curse had tainted it, and it would continue to thrive long after. But now it was your responsibility. You were the one who stood between the forest and the forces that sought to claim its power. There is always a price, the trees murmured. The balance must be maintained. The forest will never forget what you have done, but it will also test you. It will challenge you, for the heart of the land is not a simple thing to protect. It will call upon you when the time is right. And you must be ready. You nodded, understanding the gravity of your new role. The trees had chosen you, not out of pity, but because they saw something in you. Something that was connected to the land, to the forest, to the very heartbeat of the earth itself. You were a part of it just as the forest was a part of you. And now you had a duty to stand guard over it, to keep the balance intact. But even as you stood there, the weight of the forest's power surging through you, you felt the first stirrings of doubt. What would you have to sacrifice? What would it cost to protect the heart of the forest? The whispers of the trees, though calm and steady, held a warning. Nothing comes without sacrifice. Even the heart must give of itself to remain whole. The forest will ask of you what you least expect. And when it does, you must be prepared. You took a deep breath, steadying yourself. The path ahead was uncertain. You didn't know what challenges lay in wait, what forces would rise to test the balance you had fought so hard to restore. But you knew one thing, that this forest, this land was worth fighting for. It was worth protecting. With one final glance at the ancient tree, the heart of the forest, you stepped back, your heart heavy with purpose. The path ahead was unclear, but you had made your choice. You would stand as the guardian of the forest, and you would face whatever came next. The trees whispered one last time, their voices fading into the wind. The journey is just beginning, guardian. And with that, the clearing seemed to shift, the forest stretching out before you in all its wild, untamed beauty. The forest around you shifted, the air heavy with the promise of what was to come. You stood before the heart of the forest, the ancient tree that had become both your anchor and your responsibility. Its presence still thrummed through your veins, a constant reminder of your new role, of the duty now binding you to this place, to the land itself. The roots beneath you pulsed with a steady, rhythmic beat, as if the earth itself were alive, conscious, aware of your presence. Every leaf that fluttered in the wind, every branch that creaked in the distance seemed to hold a whisper, a message you could not yet fully understand. The wind picked up again, colder this time, brushing against your skin like the fingers of the past. It wasn't just the wind. It was the forest, speaking, its voice deep and resonant, echoing through the very core of the earth. The trees, once quiet and passive, now stood as silent sentinels, their branches reaching out, intertwining with one another like a living web that connected you to every part of this ancient place. The forest was not just a habitat, it was a force, a living, breathing entity, and you were now a part of it. But with that connection came a responsibility. The soft whispers of the trees reached your ears once more. The heart has been protected, but the land is never free of danger. The hollowing is not the only threat. Other forces will rise. The land will call upon you, and you must answer, for you are the guardian now. The trials have begun. Trials. You had heard the word before, but it had never felt so real, so tangible. There was no turning back now. The peace you had helped restore was fragile, and there were forces that would always seek to disrupt the balance. Forces that had waited for centuries, lying in the shadows, growing stronger, biding their time. The heart of the forest was not invulnerable. There were other things in this vast, untamed wilderness, things older than the trees themselves. Creatures that had never been seen by human eyes, lurking in the darkest corners, watching, waiting. As the wind whistled through the canopy above, the forest seemed to stretch its limbs in warning. The trees groaned, their branches creaking under the weight of the ancient knowledge they held. The land had always been alive, but now it was watching you, waiting for you to prove that you could stand as its guardian. The heart may have been safe for now, but the trials had only just begun. You turned away from the tree, feeling the energy coursing through your body as if the forest itself were pushing you forward. There was no turning back now. The path ahead was unknown, shrouded in mystery and darkness. But it was yours to walk. The guardian's path was never easy. It was never certain. The forest closed in around you, the air thick with the scent of moss and damp earth. The shadows seemed to grow longer, and the trees around you took on a darker, more menacing hue. It was as if the land itself was testing you, pulling you deeper into its heart, into the unknown. The first trial came swiftly. A sudden rustling in the underbrush caught your attention. The trees seemed to lean toward you as if urging you to look closer. From the shadows, something moved, a shape, dark and fleeting, moving with unsettling speed. Your heart raced, your senses on edge. The wind shifted again, carrying with it the scent of something wild. It was not the familiar, comforting scent of the forest. It was something else, something dangerous. Before you could react, a low growl echoed from the underbrush, followed by a rustling of leaves. You spun around, your body tensing, your instincts screaming at you to be ready. Then, out of the shadows, it emerged, a creature unlike any you had ever seen. It was a hulking mass of muscle and fur, its body a twisted combination of predator and prey. Its eyes glowed with an eerie yellow light, sharp and predatory, and its claws scraped against the earth as it moved toward you, its every step heavy and deliberate. The beast was massive, towering over you, its maw filled with razor-sharp teeth that gleamed in the dim light. It was a creature of the forest, a guardian of the wilds, but it was not your ally. Not anymore. Its growls filled the air, vibrating through your chest, and you knew instantly that it was a test, a challenge. The forest was watching, waiting to see if you could defend the heart, if you could protect the land. With a sudden, terrifying lunge, the creature leapt toward you, its claws outstretched, aiming for your throat. There was no time to think, only to react. You drew upon the energy of the forest, the ancient power that now flowed through you, and the ground beneath your feet seemed to shift. The roots responded, surging from the earth like a tide, twisting and writhing, coiling around the creature's legs, holding it in place. The beast roared in frustration, thrashing against the roots that held it, but they were strong, stronger than it had anticipated. The forest was helping you. The land was testing you, but it was also protecting you. You pushed forward, using the energy that pulsed in your veins to guide the roots, commanding them to tighten their hold. The creature struggled, but it was no match for the force of the earth beneath it. Its growls grew weaker, its movements slower, until finally the roots had it pinned to the ground. The forest fell silent, the wind stilling as the creature's growls faded into nothing. You stood there, breathing heavily, your chest rising and falling with each labored breath. The power you had just wielded, the connection to the forest's energy, was overwhelming. It had taken all of your will to subdue the beast, but you had done it. You had passed the first trial. But as you stood there, a strange sense of unease washed over you. This was only the beginning. You stepped back, your eyes scanning the stillness of the forest around you. The wind had died down, and the trees stood silent as if watching, waiting. The beast's form remained still, pinned by the roots, but it was not dead. It was only subdued, waiting for its next move. The trial had been more than just a test of strength. It was a test of your connection to the land, to the forest, to the energy that flowed beneath it. You have passed the first trial, Guardian, the trees whispered. But this is only the beginning. The forest will test you again, and again, and again. You must be ready. The words echoed in your mind as the forest seemed to shift again. The trial was not over. It had only just begun. You took a deep breath, steadying yourself. The creature, though subdued, still twitched beneath the roots, its eyes burning with defiance. But you had no time to deal with it now. The next trial was already on its way. The forest was vast, and its trials were many. Each step you took would bring you closer to the heart of the forest, but each step would also bring new challenges, new dangers, and you had to be ready. You had to prove that you were worthy of the title the trees had given you, the Guardian. The forest around you was still, unnervingly still, as if the very air held its breath. The massive beast that had lunged at you moments before now lay motionless, bound by the roots that twisted around it. But even as you stood there, your heart still racing from the intense encounter, you couldn't shake the sense that this trial was far from over. The first trial had been a test of strength, a demonstration of your newfound power to call upon the forest itself. But the forest, in its infinite wisdom, would not be satisfied with mere displays of force. It was far more subtle, far more intricate than that. Its trials, you knew, would demand more than just raw power. They would demand balance, patience, wisdom. The silence around you deepened, and the weight of the forest's gaze pressed down on you like the weight of 1,000 watching eyes. The trees had always been silent, ancient witnesses to the ebb and flow of time, but now they seemed alive with intent, their branches creaking as if they too were waiting for something. You have passed the first trial, Guardian, the trees whispered again, their voices low and deep, vibrating through the very air. But your journey is far from complete. You will face many trials before you can truly call yourself the protector of the heart. The forest is vast, and it will challenge you in ways you cannot yet understand. A chill ran down your spine as the wind picked up again, stronger this time, tugging at your cloak, whispering through the branches above. The storm was coming, and you could feel it in the air. The forest, it seemed, had decided that it was time for the next test to begin. The skies overhead had darkened, the once gentle light of the forest now obscured by thick clouds that gathered with alarming speed. The rustling of the leaves in the trees grew more frantic, as if the wind itself was warning you. A low rumble of thunder echoed across the forest, sending a ripple of unease through the ground beneath your feet. It was as if the very weather had turned against you. The tempest is upon you, the trees intoned, their voices now filled with a somber tone. This trial will test your resilience, your ability to endure, to stand firm in the face of overwhelming force. You didn't need to be told twice. You could feel it now, the impending storm gathering around you. The air was thick, heavy with the energy of the coming tempest. The wind howled through the trees, bending their branches low, as though the entire forest was bowing under the weight of the storm. You could hear the distant crack of thunder, growing louder with each passing second. It wasn't just a storm, it was a force of nature, a raw, unrelenting power that seemed to bear down on everything in its path. The ground beneath your feet trembled, and you could feel the forest stirring, its roots shifting beneath the surface as if preparing for the coming onslaught. A low, menacing growl rumbled through the earth, a sound not unlike the growl of the beast you had subdued, but far deeper, far older. The air crackled with tension as the storm approached, and you realized with a sinking feeling that the forest was not just witnessing the storm, it was summoning it. The trial, you understood, was not only a test of your strength and power. It was a test of your ability to stand against forces that were far beyond your control. And then the storm hit. A flash of lightning split the sky, followed by a deafening clap of thunder that shook the very earth beneath you. The wind howled, rising to a deafening roar, and the first heavy raindrops began to fall, quickly turning into a torrential downpour. The trees around you groaned and creaked, their massive trunks swaying in the violent gusts of wind. The forest had become a battlefield, the tempest its weapon. You fought to keep your footing, the ground slick with rain, your cloak torn by the relentless wind. But you stood your ground. The trial had begun, and you could not afford to falter. You reached deep within yourself, calling upon the connection you had forged with the forest, the energy that flowed through you like a river of life. The wind whipped around you, pushing against your body, but you planted your feet firmly on the wet earth, grounding yourself in the ancient power of the forest. The roots, though hidden beneath the soil, pulsed with energy, supporting you, connecting you to the land. "Resist the storm," the trees whispered, their voices almost drowned out by the roar of the tempest. "Stand firm in the face of the chaos. Only then will you prove yourself worthy." The storm raged around you, a violent whirlwind of wind and rain that threatened to tear you apart. Lightning crackled through the sky, illuminating the darkened forest in stark, blinding flashes of light. The ground seemed to shift beneath you, as though the very earth was being torn asunder by the fury of the storm. The trees swayed violently, their roots creaking and snapping under the pressure. The sound of thunder was deafening, a constant rolling growl that seemed to come from the very heart of the earth. But you stood. You focused on the pulse of the forest beneath you, the steady rhythm of the land's heartbeat that matched your own. The wind howled in your ears, the rain stung against your face, but you did not move. The storm raged around you, but you stood as the anchor in the eye of the tempest. And then, just as suddenly as it had come, the storm began to subside. The winds eased, the rain lightened, and the thunder faded into the distance. The trees groaned in relief, their branches creaking as the pressure lifted. The air, thick with moisture, felt heavy with the energy that had built up during the trial. You stood there, soaked to the bone, your body trembling with exhaustion, but your mind clear, your spirit unbroken. The storm had tested you. It had pushed you to the limits of your endurance, forcing you to stand firm in the face of chaos and destruction. And you had passed. You had stood your ground, unwavering in the face of overwhelming force. "You have endured the tempest," the trees whispered, their voices now soft and soothing like a lullaby. "You have proven your resilience. But the trials are far from over. The heart of the forest is a place of balance. You must learn to endure not just the storms but the silence, the stillness, the waiting." A sudden calm settled over the forest, and the rain began to taper off. The wind slowed to a gentle breeze, and the air, thick with moisture, became still. The trees stood tall and resolute, their branches once again reaching toward the sky, their roots deep in the earth. The heart of the forest pulsed with life, a steady beat that you could feel in your bones. The trial of the tempest had ended, but the path ahead was still shrouded in mystery. The trees were right. The trials would continue. The storm had tested your ability to resist, to endure, but the true test lay in the stillness, in the silence that would follow. The heart had been protected, but now it was your duty to keep it safe, not just from the forces of nature, but from those who would seek to use it for their own ends. The land would call upon you again, and you had to be ready. You glanced around the clearing, the rain still dripping from the leaves, the air thick with the scent of earth and growth. The forest had been your trial, but it was also your ally. It had tested you, yes, but it had also embraced you. The path ahead was long, and the trials would come one after another, each one more challenging than the last. But you had passed the first two, and you would face whatever came next. For the heart of the forest, and for the land itself, you would stand. The storm had passed. The winds that had once howled through the trees had now softened to a gentle breeze, carrying with it the scent of wet earth and the distant whisper of leaves stirring in the aftermath. The forest had shifted, its energy settling into a calm, almost expectant stillness. The ground beneath your feet felt damp, the air thick with moisture as the rainwater trickled through the roots and leaves, nourishing the land. The forest, once a chaotic and violent storm, now seemed at peace again, but you knew better than to think the trials were over. The trees stood silent, their massive trunks towering above you like ancient sentinels, their roots burrowing deep into the earth, linking everything in a vast web of life. You could feel the pulse of the land beneath your feet, steady and strong but also fragile. The heart of the forest was protected for now, but the balance of the land was something that would always be in flux. The storm, though fierce, was just one of many forces that could threaten this fragile equilibrium. The air felt thick with anticipation, as if the forest was holding its breath. It was no longer the violent force of nature that had tested your strength and endurance. It was something else now, something more subtle, more insidious. The silence around you felt different, unnerving, like a calm before another storm. You had passed the first trials, the test of strength and resilience, but you could sense that the next trial would not be so obvious. The forest would not be testing your power with another storm or a beast to fight. No, this time the trial would be one of patience, of endurance in the face of stillness. The silence. And then you felt it. A presence. It was not something you could see, but you could feel it. A shadow that moved in the corner of your vision, something that watched you from the depths of the trees. Your heartbeat quickened, your senses heightening, alerting you to something other in the forest. The trees around you swayed ever so slightly in the breeze, but there was something unnatural about their movement. It was too deliberate, too controlled. You weren't alone. You looked around, trying to catch a glimpse of whatever was watching you, but the forest was vast and the shadows were deep. The sun had begun to dip lower in the sky, casting long, twisted shadows across the ground. The soft light of twilight filtered through the canopy, but the stillness remained. You were being watched. The voice, deep and resonant, echoed in your mind, sending a chill down your spine. The trees, the forest, they weren't just alive with life. They were alive with awareness. The land, the heart, it was all conscious, connected. And it was watching. Observing, testing. You glanced around, your eyes narrowing, trying to pinpoint the source of the voice, but the forest around you was still. Too still. The trees seemed to whisper among themselves, their voices like a distant hum in your mind. The watcher is here. You could feel it now, the presence that had been there all along, lingering just out of sight, observing your every move. The silence deepened and it felt suffocating. The wind had died down completely, leaving only the sound of your own breathing, the occasional rustle of leaves, and the distant murmur of the forest itself. You must learn to endure the silence, the trees whispered, to stand in the presence of the watcher without faltering, to understand that not all trials are fought with force. Some are fought with patience. You closed your eyes, steadying your breath, trying to calm your racing heart. The silence stretched on, oppressive and heavy, and you felt as though the very air was pressing in on you, stifling your thoughts, clouding your senses. The watcher was out there, hidden in the depths of the forest, and it was waiting for you to make a move, waiting for you to show fear, to show weakness. You took a step forward, slowly, carefully, as if the very ground beneath you might shift at any moment. The trees around you remained silent, their branches swaying, but there was no rustling of leaves, no sound except for the rhythmic pounding of your heart. It is in the stillness that true strength is tested, the trees murmured. Do not let the silence fool you. The watcher knows your every thought, your every fear. Stand firm, guardian. Stand in the presence of the silence and do not falter. You tried to steady your mind, focusing on the pulse of the forest beneath you, the beat of the earth that resonated in your chest. The forest had always been alive with energy, with life, with the ebb and flow of the world's rhythms. But now there was a sense of being alone with the stillness, alone with the watcher. The watcher was not an enemy to be fought. It was a presence to be endured. Minutes stretched into hours as you stood there, the world around you fading into a blur of shadow and light. The silence was overwhelming, a presence that gnawed at the edges of your sanity, and you could feel it in your bones. The knowledge that the watcher had been there all along. It had always been there. In the rustling of leaves, in the movement of branches, in the whispers of the trees. It was not a force to be defeated. It was a part of the forest, as ancient and eternal as the land itself. The trees had spoken of it. The watcher was not a thing that could be destroyed. It was a thing that had always been, always would be. And then, without warning, the silence was broken. The crack, the snap, the sound of something moving, something large, coming from the depths of the forest. Your breath caught in your throat as you turned toward the sound, your eyes searching the shadows, your heart pounding in your chest. Something was there. You could feel it, the weight of its presence, the watchful gaze that never left you. The shadows parted, and in the dim twilight you saw it. A figure, tall and cloaked in darkness, stood at the edge of the clearing. Its form was indistinct, its features shrouded in shadow, but you could feel its eyes upon you, cold, distant, unblinking. The Watcher. It did not move. It simply stood there watching, waiting. You knew this was the trial. Not the storm. Not the beast. This was the trial of patience. The trial of endurance in the face of an endless, unyielding presence. The Watcher was not an enemy to be vanquished. It was a test to see how long you could withstand the pressure, the weight of its gaze. It was a test of your resolve, your ability to remain steadfast in the face of an unblinking, eternal observer. The wind began to stir once more, faint at first, and then growing in strength. The trees, the leaves, they seemed to shift in response to the Watcher's presence, their branches trembling as if acknowledging its power. The forest, alive and aware, was watching you, and the Watcher was its eye. "Do not falter," the trees whispered. "Do not let the silence break you. Stand firm. Show the Watcher that you can endure. Show the forest that you can remain unwavering in the face of its scrutiny." The Watcher took a step forward, its figure becoming clearer in the fading light, and though you could not see its face, you felt its presence more strongly than ever. It was no longer just an observer, it was a force. A reminder that in the forest, not all threats came from the visible, from the tangible. Some threats were unseen, hidden in the silence. And that silence, that stillness, was just as dangerous as any storm. You closed your eyes, grounding yourself in the pulse of the earth beneath you. The Watcher would wait. It would stand in silence, and you would endure. You would stand firm. The trial was not to fight, not to react, but to be patient. To show that you could withstand the unyielding gaze of the forest without fear, without doubt. The silence stretched on, and you stood there, your heart pounding in your chest, knowing that the Watcher would wait, and you would stand. The silence stretched on, an oppressive weight pressing down on you, thick and suffocating, like the still air before a thunderstorm. The Watcher remained at the edge of the clearing, unmoving, its form obscured by shadows that seemed to cling to it like an extension of the forest itself. You could not see its face, nor its eyes, but you felt them piercing into you, stripping away the layers of defense you had carefully built up over the course of your journey. Every thought, every fear, every doubt you had ever carried was laid bare before the Watcher, exposed to its gaze. The wind had died down completely, and the world around you seemed to hold its breath. The trees, the earth, the very forest, they were all silent now. The trial had entered its most delicate phase, and you knew that every second counted. Every moment spent in the Watcher's presence was a test of your resolve, a trial of your ability to remain steadfast, unwavering, to endure. The Watcher's presence was not one of malice. It was not an enemy that sought to destroy you, but a force that sought to observe, to test your endurance, your inner strength. The trees had told you this. Some trials were not fought with power or strength, but with patience, with the ability to stand firm in the face of discomfort, of fear, of the unknown. The forest had been alive with energy, with a pulse that you could feel deep in your bones, but now that pulse had slowed. The heart of the forest was still there, deep beneath the earth, steady and strong, but the world around you seemed to hold its breath, waiting for you to make your move. And so you waited too. Your muscles ached with the stillness, your body stiff from the tension that had been building for what felt like an eternity. Every part of you wanted to turn, to break the silence, to run toward the Watcher and confront it, to fight it, to do something, anything, to end the stillness that had begun to gnaw at your mind. But you knew better. The trial was not to be defeated, but to be endured. You had to stand in the face of the Watcher's gaze and not waver. You had to show the forest, show the Watcher that you could remain steady, unshaken. Endure the silence, the trees whispered, their voices distant but clear, like the murmur of the wind through the leaves. Stand firm in the face of the Watcher. Prove your strength not through action, but through stillness. Prove that you can endure what others cannot. The Watcher took another slow, deliberate step forward, its presence growing heavier with each passing moment. The shadow it cast seemed to stretch across the ground, reaching toward you as though it were pulling at your very soul. But still you did not move. You could feel the Watcher's gaze upon you, an unblinking, unyielding force that sought to test your patience, to draw out your fears. "Do not let it break you," the trees murmured. "Do not let the Watcher's silence drive you to madness. The forest will test your resolve. It will call to you, whisper to you, but you must not answer. You must remain still. You must endure." The Watcher took another step. It was closer now, so close that you could feel the weight of its presence pressing down on you like a storm cloud on the horizon. You could hear its breath now, shallow and steady, though you could not see its form. It was as though it were made of shadow, a presence that was both part of the forest and yet apart from it, a force that had always been watching, always waiting. The watcher is ancient, the trees whispered. It is a part of the forest, a keeper of its secrets. It has seen everything, watched everything. It knows your heart, your mind, your fears. And they were right. The longer you stood there, the more you felt the watcher's power, not as an external force, but as something that invaded your thoughts, your very consciousness. It was not a being of flesh and bone, but of shadow and mind. It did not need to speak, to move, to fight. It only needed to watch. You could feel it now, creeping into the edges of your awareness, your deepest fears, your darkest doubts. The watcher was not just an observer, it was a mirror reflecting back to you everything you had ever tried to bury, everything you had ever feared. The shadows of the past, the uncertainties of the future, they all rose up in the stillness, surrounding you, pressing in on you from every side. It was a test of endurance, but not just of the body. It was a test of the mind, of the spirit. You are not alone, the trees whispered, their voices a soothing balm against the turmoil that threatened to rise within you. You are never alone. The forest is with you. The land is with you. And you, guardian, are part of it. You closed your eyes, grounding yourself in the deep, steady rhythm of the earth beneath you. The heart of the forest still pulsed, still beat beneath the layers of soil and rock. It was the foundation, the anchor, and you were tied to it, connected to it. The watcher could gaze upon you all it wanted, but it could not change the truth that you were a part of this land. You were its guardian. The moment stretched on, and still the watcher did not move. It did not speak. It simply waited, its presence a constant pressure in the silence. Your muscles screamed in protest. Your mind began to twist in the oppressive stillness, but you did not falter. You did not break. You stood firm, resolute in the face of the watcher's unblinking gaze. And then, just as you thought you could stand no longer, the presence shifted. The watcher was still there, but its form, its weight, seemed to recede, like the fading of a storm on the horizon. The shadows in the clearing deepened, but they no longer felt suffocating. The pressure eased just a little. The stillness, while heavy, no longer felt unbearable. You have endured, the trees whispered, their voices full of a quiet reverence. You have withstood the watcher's gaze. You have proven that you can remain calm in the face of the unknown. But the trials are not over. There are more to come. The watcher's presence faded completely, its form retreating into the shadows of the forest. The trees whispered as the wind picked up again, the rustling of leaves growing louder. The clearing seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief, and you too released the tension that had been building in your chest. Your muscles still ached from the stillness, but you were stronger now. You had passed the test. The trial of silence had been one of the hardest yet. It had not tested your strength or your endurance in the traditional sense, but it had tested your mind, your will. It had tested your ability to remain still, to stand firm, even when the very air around you seemed to scream for you to move, to react, to fight. But you had stood, and in doing so you had proven that you were worthy. Worthy of the heart, worthy of the forest. The watcher had been an observer, a keeper of the forest's deepest secrets. And now you too were part of those secrets, part of the land. But even as you stood there, your chest still rising and falling with the aftermath of the trial, you knew that this was only one of many tests. The forest had many trials yet to offer, many lessons to teach. The journey was far from over. The heart of the forest was protected, yes, but it would not remain safe forever. There would always be new threats, new forces that sought to disrupt the balance. And it would be your responsibility to stand against them. You were the guardian, and the forest was watching. The watcher was gone, its presence receding like a shadow retreating into the depths of the forest. But though the silence had lifted, the weight of the trial lingered in the air, thick and heavy, as though the very earth had absorbed the tension of the watcher's gaze. The wind, though gentle now, carried with it a sense of profound change. The storm had passed, but the forest had been irrevocably altered by what had transpired. The trial of silence had not been just a test of endurance, it had been a marking, a shaping of something deep within you. Your mind swirled with the memories of the watcher's gaze, the feeling of being observed, of standing in the face of eternity without faltering. You had withstood the pressure, but a part of you understood that it wasn't just about surviving the test, it was about becoming something more. You had stood still, rooted in place, unyielding in the face of the watcher's scrutiny. And in that stillness, you had become one with the forest in a way you had never been before. As you took a deep breath, the familiar scent of wet earth and pine filled your senses, grounding you in the present. The forest around you had returned to its natural rhythm, but it felt different now, as if the very air itself was vibrating with an energy that hadn't been there before. The trees, the earth, the sky, it was all subtly changed, as if the land itself had recognized your endurance and had chosen to welcome you more fully into its fold. But as the forest settled into its new equilibrium, you could not shake the feeling that something was still out of place. The watcher was gone, yes, but the forest still held a sense of waiting, a feeling that the trials were far from over, that the next challenge was already beginning to unfold, just beyond the horizon. The trees, ancient and wise, whispered in the wind, their voices melding together in a chorus of quiet understanding. The watcher has tested your resolve, they murmured. But the forest is vast, and the threads of fate are woven through every leaf, every root, every stone. You have passed the trial of silence, but now you must face the trial of the threads that bind all things together, the unseen forces that govern the very flow of life itself. The air around you seemed to thrum with an energy you could not see, but could certainly feel. A subtle pull, as if the forest itself was drawing you deeper into its mysteries. The trees shifted, their branches twisting and turning, their roots rippling beneath the earth as if alive with purpose. The land was awakening, and so, too, was something within you. The threads are ancient, the trees continued, their voices growing softer. They have been woven for millennia, connecting all things in the forest. They bind you to this place, to the heart of the forest. But they are not always clear, not always straight. You must follow them, guardian, but know this. The threads of fate are not always what they seem. They can deceive. They can lead you astray. You looked around, scanning the shifting forest for any sign of what the trees were speaking of, but the clearing remained quiet, the shadows stretching longer as twilight deepened into night. The first stars began to appear overhead, flickering like tiny lanterns in the sky, their light faint against the vastness of the darkening heavens. And then you saw it. A single thread, glowing faintly in the darkening shadows, wove its way between the trees, barely visible but undeniably present. It was delicate, like a silver strand of spider's silk, shimmering in the faint starlight, and it seemed to beckon you. It wound its way around the trunks of the trees, disappearing into the depths of the forest, just beyond the edge of the clearing. Was the thread. Follow it, the trees whispered. It is your path, the path of fate. But be warned, do not stray. Do not let the threads mislead you. The way is treacherous. You knew then that the time had come. The watcher's trial had been but one step. The path ahead was now clear, but it was fraught with uncertainty. The threads of fate would guide you, yes, but they would also challenge you, test you in ways you could not yet comprehend. You took your first step forward, your feet sinking into the damp earth, and the forest seemed to breathe with you. The air felt heavy with the pulse of the land, as if every movement you made was connected to the ancient rhythm of the earth itself. The thread glimmered in front of you, winding its way through the underbrush, leading you deeper into the shadows. You could feel the pull of it, like an invisible force guiding your every move, urging you to follow. And so you did. The deeper you ventured into the forest, the more the world seemed to shift. The trees began to change, their trunks twisting into strange, contorted shapes, their bark dark and gleaming in the dim light. The shadows grew longer, more oppressive, as if the night itself were thickening around you. The wind rustled the leaves in a language you couldn't quite understand, and the distant sound of water flowing could be heard in the distance, a soft, eerie murmur. The thread continued to guide you, weaving its way through the forest, and you could feel the pull of it growing stronger. It was as though the very fabric of the forest was alive with energy, and the thread was a part of it, a living, breathing entity that responded to your every movement. The thread is not just a path, the trees murmured. It is a part of you. It is the connection between the heart of the forest and your own soul. It binds you to the land, to the forest, and to the ancient forces that govern all things. But it is not always so simple. The threads can deceive. They can lead you astray. You didn't know what to make of their words, but you pressed on. The thread was clear before you, shining like a beacon in the dark, and you had no choice but to follow it. Your every step felt like a movement through time itself, the forest shifting around you, the ground beneath you soft and yielding, yet somehow unshakable. And then, without warning, the thread before you began to split. At first, it was a subtle change, almost imperceptible. But as you stepped closer, the thread began to split into two separate strands, each one twisting off in a different direction. One path seemed to lead deeper into the forest, the trees growing denser and darker as if the shadows themselves were closing in. The other path, however, led toward a clearing, bathed in the faint light of the moon, the trees standing like silent sentinels around it, their branches twisted into unnatural shapes. Both paths seemed to beckon, both threads shining faintly in the dark. You could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on you. The threads of fate were not always clear. They could lead you toward one destiny or another. But the question remained, which thread was the true one? The threads of fate are never simple, the trees whispered, their voices filled with a strange sadness. They are not always the path you wish to follow, nor the one you understand. You must choose, guardian. The forest will only show you what you seek, not what you desire. Follow the thread, but know this, the path is not always what it seems. You stood at the crossroads, the two threads gleaming before you, the weight of your decision settling deep in your chest. The air felt thick with the potential of the unknown, the pull of fate urging you forward, pulling you in two different directions. And the forest was watching, waiting to see which path you would choose. The air around you seemed to hum with energy, thick and alive with the tension of the decision that lay before you. The two threads shimmered in the moonlight, their delicate strands splitting the forest in two, each path calling to you in its own way. The forest had never seemed more alive, and yet, it felt as though it was holding its breath, waiting for you to choose, for your actions to set in motion a series of events far beyond what you could predict. This was no longer just a test. It was a moment of consequence, a choice that would ripple through the very fabric of the forest and beyond. Your heart raced as you stood at the crossroads, your senses heightened, every crackle of the leaves, every distant hoot of an owl, every flicker of shadow, suddenly seeming infinitely significant. The trees, ancient and knowing, stood in silent witness to this decision, their branches swaying gently in the night breeze, as though they too were waiting for your move. Choose wisely, guardian, the trees whispered. Their voices seemed to echo from every direction, as if the forest itself were speaking, its words laden with both warning and hope. The threads you follow will shape the future of the heart. One path leads to a deeper understanding of the land, of the very essence of life. The other will reveal the secrets hidden beneath the surface, dark truths that are not easily understood. You glance between the two threads. The first path, the one that led deeper into the forest, felt familiar in an unsettling way. It was as if the air itself pulled you toward it, urging you forward. The trees in that direction seemed older, their trunks gnarled and twisted with age, their branches reaching up like skeletal hands. The air here was thick with moisture, the scent of damp earth strong, and the distant sound of rushing water filled the air, adding to the sense of mystery that tugged at your heart. The second path, which led toward the clearing, was different. The trees there were twisted in ways that felt unnatural, their bark blackened in places, their leaves a strange dark shade of green. The clearing itself was bathed in the soft glow of the moon, but there was an eerie stillness to the light, unnatural, as if the moonlight itself had taken on a different hue. The ground in the clearing was covered with white stones that shimmered faintly, and the air felt colder here, as though it carried a warning. The threads themselves glimmered, pulling you in two opposite directions. The one leading deeper into the forest beckoned with the promise of understanding, of connection with the land and its ancient power. The other, to the clearing, seemed to whisper of forgotten things, of secrets buried beneath the surface of the world, and of knowledge that could change everything. You had always trusted your instincts, and right now, every part of you screamed to follow the path that led deeper into the forest. It felt as though it held the answers you had sought from the very beginning, the answers to your purpose, your place in this land. But then, the other path, the one that led to the clearing, seemed to call to you with equal force. There was something there, hidden beneath the surface, something dark and powerful that felt crucial to your journey. You cannot know the future, guardian, the trees whispered again. The threads will lead you where you must go, but they will not tell you the cost. Some knowledge is dangerous. Some paths are not meant to be walked. Your heart thudded in your chest as you took a step forward, drawn toward the first thread. It was a decision, a commitment. The forest, as vast as it was, had always felt like home, and perhaps this path would deepen that connection, give you a greater understanding of its mysteries. But then, as if the forest itself had heard your thoughts, the wind picked up, howling through the trees, sending shivers down your spine. The branches above rustled, but this time the sound was not comforting. It was unsettling. The trees, once welcoming, now seemed to lean toward you, their limbs almost reaching for you as if trying to hold you back. The clearing path shimmered once more in your peripheral vision. The moonlight here had a strange pull, its soft glow promising revelations, but those revelations felt heavy, like the weight of something long buried. A nagging feeling tugged at your heart. Could it be that the forest was trying to warn you, trying to stop you from making a decision that could alter everything? You shook your head, trying to steady your racing thoughts. The trees had given you a choice, but they hadn't told you which path was right. It was yours to choose. The thread that led into the forest continued to pull at your senses. The rushing water you had heard earlier seemed to be growing louder, calling you toward it, as if the flow of life itself was urging you to follow. That path promised a deeper understanding of the forest, a closer connection to its heart. The wisdom of the trees was yours to claim, but the cost, you knew, was never simple. The forest was old, ancient beyond reckoning, and its knowledge came at a price. The other path to the clearing beckoned with an eerie stillness. The stone-covered ground in the moonlight seemed to hold a secret, a hidden truth that felt just beyond reach. This was the path of the unknown, the place where things lay buried. Dark things, forgotten things, and you could feel it, the pull. The deeper you stood, the more you could feel the tangle of the threads, reaching into your very soul, tugging at your heart, making your thoughts swirl. The paths were not just external forces, they were inside you too. They were questions, doubts, desires. One was a path of connection, of understanding. The other was a path of revelation, of secrets hidden beneath the earth. The choice was yours. You took a deep breath, trying to center yourself. The forest, the land, the threats, they were all connected, and they would not reveal their truths without testing you. It was not a question of whether you were ready. You had already proven that you could endure. The question now was, which direction would you take? Which path would you choose to follow? The moon above you shone brighter, as if urging you forward, and the thread that led into the clearing glimmered in the pale light. It called to you, and though your heart still pulled toward the deeper forest, you knew there was something here in this moment that could not be ignored. Perhaps, just as the Watcher had tested you through silence, this choice was not a test of your courage or your will. It was a test of your ability to listen, to truly listen, to the subtle forces around you, to the thread that was meant for you. You took a step toward the clearing, feeling the cool air brush your skin. The ground was uneven beneath your feet, the stones sharp and cold against your boots, and with each step, the shadows around you seemed to stretch longer, pulling you further into the mystery. The thread of fate guided you just as the trees had promised. The moonlight ahead shimmered, casting an ethereal glow on the ground. And there, in the distance, you saw it. A dark figure standing beneath the twisted trees. It was still, motionless, like a shadow carved into the very landscape. You did not know what it was, but you could feel its gaze, cold and steady, watching you approach. The moment had come. The decision was made. You had chosen the path of the unknown. The ground beneath your feet grew rougher with every step, as the stones that had once been scattered across the forest floor now began to form a rough, unnatural path toward the clearing. The trees around you seemed to tighten, their gnarled limbs twisting in strange, unsettling ways, their leaves trembling in the faint breeze. There was no longer the comforting murmur of the forest's heart beneath your feet, no gentle pulse from the deep, no steady rhythm to ground you. Instead, the forest seemed to be holding its breath, as though waiting for you to uncover a long-forgotten truth. The moon, hanging heavy in the sky, bathed the path in an eerie light. It was no longer just a source of illumination, but something more. The pale glow seemed to shift and ripple like a living thing, watching you, urging you forward. Every step you took felt heavier than the last, as if the very earth itself was pushing you toward the clearing, pulling you into a space beyond what was safe or known. The trees, twisted and ancient, leaned in close, as though they too were listening, waiting for you to reach the center of the clearing, to find whatever it was that had been hidden there. And then, just as you felt the pull of the place beginning to overwhelm you, you stepped into the clearing. At first, it appeared peaceful enough, the moonlight shimmering off the white stones scattered across the ground. The clearing was small, almost serene in its quiet beauty. The stones, smooth and round, seemed to pulse with an energy all their own, a faint glow that matched the rhythm of your heartbeat. There was a calmness in the air here, a stillness that seemed so perfect, so pure that it was almost unreal. But as you looked deeper into the clearing, the stillness felt wrong. The shadows cast by the moon seemed too dark, too deep for such a small space. There was an overwhelming weight to the silence here, as if the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. You stepped forward, your boots crunching softly on the stones, and as you did, you noticed it. The figure in the center of the clearing, a figure you had seen only faintly in your peripheral vision as you approached. It was tall, unnaturally tall, its form cloaked in the same dark shadows that clung to the trees, as though it were made of the very night itself. It stood perfectly still, motionless, with its back to you. The air grew colder. A deep, unsettling chill that seemed to seep into your bones. You could feel the tension in the air, the pressure mounting as the figure's presence seemed to fill the clearing, even though it had yet to move. The moonlight cast long, twisted shadows from its form, as though the very night were distorting around it. You felt your breath catch in your throat. Something was wrong. But still you could not turn away. There was a pull to the figure, something unexplainable drawing you closer. The energy in the clearing seemed to vibrate in time with your heartbeat, growing louder, more intense with every step you took. The shadows around you flickered like the edges of a dream, and for a moment, you wondered if this was all real. If the world around you was bending, shifting into something else. And then, just as you were a few feet away from the figure, it moved. Slowly, deliberately, it turned. The movement was so smooth, so fluid, that it seemed as though it were not bound by the rules of the physical world. It turned its head first, its eyes locking onto yours. They were not eyes as you would recognize them. There were no pupils, no irises. Just deep, endless voids that seemed to swallow the light around them. Dark, fathomless eyes, the color of the deepest night, reflecting only emptiness. It took a step toward you, and the ground beneath your feet seemed to tremble with its every movement. The stones in the clearing began to hum, a low, deep resonance that vibrated through the very air, filling your chest with an oppressive weight. You felt the pull of something ancient, something old and forgotten, stirring within the earth beneath you. The trees around the clearing groaned, their limbs creaking as though they too were waking from a long slumber. And then it spoke. Its voice was not like any sound you had heard before. It wasn't a voice in the traditional sense. It was a presence that filled your mind, vibrating deep in your core. It was a voice that seemed to bypass language altogether, communicating directly with your soul. "You have come seeking knowledge, guardian," it said, its voice a low murmur like the shifting of the earth itself. "But knowledge, like all things, has its cost. You stand at the threshold of the unknown, at the edge of the heart's deepest secrets. But are you prepared to bear the weight of those secrets?" The air around you grew heavier, the ground beneath your feet seeming to soften and shift. The clearing was no longer a peaceful space. It had transformed into something far more sinister, a place where the veil between the known world and something much darker had been pulled back, revealing the abyss beneath. You could feel it now, the weight of the land's history, the burden of untold knowledge pressing against you. The figure in the center of the clearing stepped closer, its form growing more distinct in the moonlight. Its robes, dark as midnight, seemed to ripple as if made of liquid shadow, and the air around it grew colder, sharper. You could feel the ancient energy radiating from it, filling the space with an almost unbearable intensity. There was power here, but it was not the kind of power you had come to understand in the forest. This was a power older than the trees, older than the land itself. "The threads you followed," the figure continued, its voice carrying a strange sadness. "They were not meant for you. You have walked the path of fate, but fate, like the forest, is a living thing. Can change, twist, bend. And now you stand at a crossroads. Will you turn back, leave the secrets hidden, and preserve the balance you have fought so hard to protect? Or will you take the next step into the darkness, knowing that the cost of knowledge is more than you can bear?" The air seemed to still, and the figure's gaze, those empty void-like eyes, pierced through you, searching your very soul. You could feel it, the weight of its gaze, like it was unraveling the fabric of your mind, pulling apart your every thought, every belief, every certainty you had ever held. You felt exposed, bare, vulnerable in a way you had never felt before. "Choose now," the figure intoned, its voice growing cold, its tone filled with the gravity of something far beyond your understanding. "The threads of fate will never be the same. Your path and the forests will never be the same." It was not just a question, it was a command. You had come seeking knowledge, but the deeper you delved, the more you realized that knowledge was not without its consequences. The forest had always been a place of balance, of harmony. But now, as you stood in the clearing, you could feel the tension between what was and what could be, between the past and the future, between the truth and the lies. The figure's presence was overwhelming, its very being a testament to the power of the forest, and yet, it was different. This was not a force of nature. It was something older, something beyond nature itself. "Your choice," it whispered, its voice now barely a breath, "will decide everything. Do you wish to know what lies beyond? To face the consequences of knowing? Or do you choose to turn away, to keep the secrets buried in the dark?" You stood frozen, your mind racing, torn between the threads of fate that had led you here and the weight of the unknown that pressed against you. The decision lay heavy on your shoulders, and the world around you seemed to hold its breath, waiting for your answer. The weight of the decision pressed down on you with an intensity that felt almost suffocating. The figure in the clearing, a living shadow in the shape of a person, towered over you, its hollow eyes peering into your very soul. You had come seeking answers, seeking knowledge, but as you stood there, faced with the figure's unblinking gaze, You realized that some truths were never meant to be known. The darkness within the clearing was not just the absence of light. It was the absence of understanding, the unknown that would forever twist the mind. The air around you was thick with the promise of revelation, but it was a revelation that felt like a dangerous precipice, a cliff that would pull you into the abyss if you made the wrong move. The figure's words echoed in your mind, resonating with an ancient power that seemed to reach into the deepest recesses of your consciousness. Do you truly understand what you are asking for, Guardian? The figure asked, its voice colder now, tinged with a sense of inevitability. You stand on the edge of a chasm that holds the history of the world, the weight of knowledge that has been buried for millennia. The heart of the forest is not just a place. It is a force, an entity that holds the secrets of life, death, and rebirth. The threads you follow, the path you walk, are all tied to the very essence of this land. You felt the ground beneath you shift, not physically but in a way that made your heart race. The stones in the clearing pulsed with a rhythm of their own, and the wind picked up, howling through the trees in a chorus of distant whispers. The forest had become a living thing, breathing and shifting around you, its heart beating in sync with your own. But knowledge comes at a price. The figure continued, its presence growing darker, more pressing. The forest cannot reveal itself to just anyone. It chooses those who are worthy, those who are capable of bearing its weight. But no one ever walks away unchanged. You cannot unlearn what the heart reveals. You cannot forget once the truth has been shown to you. You took a step back, your breath catching in your throat as the enormity of what you were about to undertake settled in. The path ahead was shrouded in mystery, and yet, you felt that you could not turn back. The figure's voice, though filled with sorrow, had a clarity that you could not deny. The forest had been speaking to you since you had first set foot within its boundaries. The trials had been steps, each one leading you to this moment, this choice. You glanced once more at the figure. Its form was both familiar and alien, as if it were made of shadows but also of the forest itself. It was no longer just an entity, it was a part of the land, a manifestation of its deepest truths, and it was waiting for you to decide. Do you wish to see beyond the veil? The figure asked, its voice now a mere whisper reverberating through the trees, a distant hum that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Do you wish to know the heart's secrets, to understand the threads of fate that bind you, the forest, the world? Or will you walk away, leaving these truths buried in the soil, hidden in the shadows? The path ahead seemed to open before you, revealing the very fabric of reality itself, stretching far beyond the clearing. You could almost see the threads, delicate strands of light and shadow, intertwining, creating patterns too complex to comprehend. They stretched outward, beyond the forest, beyond the world, weaving through time itself, connecting all things in an intricate web of fate. But as you looked closer, something else became apparent. These threads were not just a map of the land. They were alive, moving, shifting in real time, altering the world around you. Each thread represented a decision, a moment, a choice. And as your eyes followed their winding paths, you could see where they converged, where they met at the center of the clearing, where you stood. You are part of this web, the figure whispered. Your actions, your choices, are woven into the very fabric of the forest. You are not an outsider, a mere observer. You are part of the heart. And the heart will not let you go until you have made your choice. The air grew heavier still. The wind howled louder, now carrying with it a haunting melody, a song of ancient times long forgotten. The clearing seemed to stretch, becoming both infinitely small and infinitely vast, like the very boundaries of reality were bending around you. The stars overhead flickered, as if watching, waiting for your answer. You knew then that the forest, the heart of the forest, had always been more than just a place. It was a living, breathing entity, connected to the very threads of fate that wove the world together. And you had been chosen not by chance but by necessity. Your journey had led you here for a reason. The land needed you to make this choice. But the price of that knowledge was steep. The figure in the clearing had made that clear. No one who stepped into the heart's domain left unchanged. The truth that awaited you was not one of simple wisdom, but one that carried with it the weight of everything, the weight of existence itself. The heart of the forest does not just reveal. The figure's voice reverberated, now like a song sung by the trees, the winds, the very land beneath you. It transforms. It pulls at your soul, stretches it, reshapes it. You will see the threads that bind all things, but you will also see what lies beneath, the darkness that lurks in the shadows of the land. Do you wish to uncover the truth? You felt your heart race, the pull of both the clearing and the forest pressing on you, urging you forward, urging you to know. The weight of the choice was unbearable, but you understood that you could not remain here forever, standing between the unknown and the known. The forest had brought you to this moment, and now it was time to choose. You took a deep breath, steadying yourself, and without fully understanding why, you took a step forward. The figure's dark eyes followed your movement, its gaze unblinking, unfeeling, as though it were both watching you and the world at once. The very earth beneath your feet seemed to tremble as if the ground itself were a living being, feeling your decision as it was made. The world around you shifted. The moonlight dimmed, and the stars above seemed to fade. The clearing melted away, and in its place, you found yourself standing in the heart of the forest, surrounded by ancient trees that towered above you. The air was thick with the scent of earth and moss, and the distant sound of water flowing gently reached your ears. But the landscape had changed. The forest was no longer the serene place you had come to know. It was a labyrinth of twisting paths, darkened by shadows that seemed to shift and move, constantly changing. The trees around you no longer whispered comforting words. Instead, they were silent, as if holding their breath, waiting. And before you, stretching out like a tapestry woven from light and shadow, were the threads. Dozens, hundreds, thousands, each one pulsing with a life of its own, vibrating in a rhythm that was both chaotic and harmonious. You could feel the energy in them, the raw power, the truth of the land itself. Each thread was connected to something, someone, an event, a choice, a moment in time. They were the lives of the forest, the choices that had led you here, and the paths that lay before you. You stepped closer, and the threads pulsed brighter, swirling around you. You could feel the weight of every decision ever made, the lives of all who had come before you, stretching out in front of you, each one waiting for you to touch it, to understand it. The figure in the distance did not speak. It simply stood, watching as you reached out, your fingers brushing the threads of fate. The moment you did, the world around you shattered. As your fingers brushed against the threads of fate, a deep vibration hummed through the air, resonating in your very bones. The pulse of the forest, the heartbeat of the land, intensified. The moment the threads connected with you, the world seemed to snap into sharp focus, like a vision clearing after a long dream-induced haze. Every sensation, every sound, every thought sharpened and amplified, as though you had stepped into a new realm of awareness. The clearing before you vanished, leaving behind an infinite expanse of dark, shifting space. You were no longer bound to the physical world, but instead existed within a realm where time itself was a mere illusion. The threads swirled around you, each one glowing faintly, their patterns intricate and complex, woven together in a cosmic dance of light and shadow. They were not just strings, not just lifelines, they were the very foundation of existence, stretching from the deepest roots of the forest to the farthest reaches of the cosmos. As you reached out, the threads responded, bending and twisting toward your touch, but instead of a simple connection, something far deeper happened. You felt a shift, a tear in the very fabric of reality. It was as if the threads were not just revealing the past, present, and future. They were unraveling them, pulling apart the veil that separated you from the truth of the universe. The threads wrapped around your hands, your arms, your body, and the sensation was like 1,000 memories being simultaneously woven and undone, bound together and split apart. The world seemed to ripple with the sensation, the air around you warping, twisting, and splintering as new truths began to unfold. Your thoughts raced, but they felt as if they were being guided, like invisible hands shaping the path your mind would take. In that moment you understood. You understood everything. You saw the past not as a series of events, but as a living, breathing entity, one that had been shaped by the decisions of every living thing, by the whispers of the wind and the crackle of fire. The past was not fixed. It was a fluid, ever-changing river, with branches stretching in 1,000 different directions, each choice splintering into infinite possibilities. You saw the birth of the forest, its first breath of life, its struggles, its victories, and its losses. The trees had not simply grown, they had been formed, shaped by forces both seen and unseen, by hands that had touched the earth in ways you could not begin to comprehend. But the past was only the beginning. As your awareness expanded, you saw the present unfold before you. The land you stood upon, the forest, the very soil that supported you, was alive with energy. Every living thing in the forest, the trees, the animals, the birds, the insects, was a part of this grand tapestry, their actions intertwining in an eternal dance of life and death. The heart of the forest was not just a place, it was a living entity, a consciousness that spanned the entirety of existence. You could feel its pulse, its breath, resonating through every fiber of your being. It was the soul of the world, and you were a part of it. But it was the future that held the most unsettling revelations. The threads of fate stretched far into the distance, winding and twisting, reaching toward the horizon of possibility. Each thread represented a potential future, a choice yet to be made, a path yet to be walked. And you saw them all. The possibilities, the endless permutations of what could be, danced before your eyes like 1,000 flickering flames, each one vying for your attention. You could see the outcomes of every decision you had ever made, and the weight of those choices began to bear down on you. The burden of knowing what would come if you chose one path over another, if you allowed the forest to unravel, or if you chose to preserve the balance. But what struck you the most was the realization that you were not just a passive observer of these threats. You were woven into them. Every moment, every decision you made was tied to the future, to the forest, to the world itself. You were not merely part of this land, you were its architect, its creator and destroyer, its guardian and its harbinger. Your choices would shape not just the forest, but the very fabric of existence. The power of the heart of the forest, the power of the threats, pulsed within you, filling you with a terrible clarity. And yet, even as the truth of everything, the past, the present, the future, unfolded before you, there was a deep sense of loss that accompanied this knowledge. The forest had whispered its truths, but in doing so, it had taken something from you. The innocence you once held, the simple understanding of the world, was gone. You could no longer see things as you once had. You had stepped into a new reality, one where the weight of every decision, every moment, was all too clear. And then, as if sensing your despair, the figure, no longer just a shadow but a presence made manifest, moved closer. It had been watching you all along, its eyes never leaving your form as you wrestled with the enormity of the revelations before you. "You have seen it," it said, its voice a mere whisper against the chaos of your thoughts. "The threats, the web of existence. You are part of it now. But what will you do with this knowledge?" The figure's words pierced through the whirlwind of your mind, cutting through the layers of confusion and fear. It was a question, simple in its clarity, yet impossible to answer. What would you do with this knowledge? You could feel the weight of the choice pressing down on you once again. You had walked the path of fate, uncovered its deepest secrets, but now, you stood at another crossroads. The knowledge of the threads had been laid bare before you, but that knowledge was not simply a gift. It was a responsibility, a burden. The truth of the forest, the universe, the heart itself, was not something to be wielded lightly. "The heart of the forest does not reveal its secrets to just anyone," the figure murmured, its voice soft yet filled with the weight of unspoken meaning. "It reveals them to those who are worthy, who are capable of bearing the truth. But the truth is not always kind. It is not always what you hope for." You closed your eyes, trying to center yourself amid the chaos of thoughts swirling within you. You felt the pull of the threads, the power of fate that was both exhilarating and terrifying. Every path, every choice, every future was now before you, and the weight of them was almost unbearable. But you knew deep down that you had been chosen for a reason. This was your purpose. This was the forest's purpose. You had come to understand the balance of life and death, of creation and destruction, of light and shadow. But you also understood that no knowledge could come without consequence. "The forest has chosen you," the figure said, its presence growing stronger, more defined. "But now it is time for you to choose. Will you carry this knowledge forward, and with it, the responsibility to protect the balance? Or will you turn away, leaving the truth buried in the shadows, hidden from the world?" You stood at the center of it all, the threads of fate swirling around you, and the answer seemed as elusive as the wind. Your heart raced, your thoughts tangled in the endless possibilities before you. You had walked the path of the forest, but now you had to decide what path you would walk next. The power was yours, but so was the responsibility. Would you embrace the truth, no matter the cost, and carry it forward into the world? Or would you leave it behind, allowing the forest to remain hidden in the shadows, protected from the world that might never understand its true nature? The silence in the realm of threads was overwhelming. It was not a silence of stillness, but one of anticipation, a waiting that stretched deep into the very heart of the forest, beyond the trees, beyond the boundaries of the clearing. The very air seemed to hold its breath, caught in the moment before your choice, a single heartbeat in the endless stretch of time. Before you, the threads of fate twirled and danced, their glowing strands beckoning you with an almost hypnotic pull. You could feel them vibrating with the pulse of the universe, each one carrying the weight of 1,000 decisions, 1,000 lives, 1,000 futures. They were alive, like the forest itself, and they had woven you into their pattern, making you a part of something much larger than yourself. They whispered of possibility, of change, of everything that could be, but they also whispered of consequences, of things that could be lost in the pursuit of knowledge. The figure, no longer a mere presence but something far more substantial, stood just beyond the threads, its shadow stretching across the shimmering strands. its eyes, dark and fathomless, locked with yours as if waiting for you to speak, to decide, to make the final choice that would tip the balance one way or the other. Its very presence was both a comfort and a terror, a reminder that the forest and everything it represented was watching you. You have seen the truth, the figure intoned, its voice softer now, almost compassionate. You have felt the weight of the threats. You understand now what you must decide. But do you understand the price? Knowledge once gained cannot be undone. The threads are not simply paths, they are destinies, and you are at the crossroads of many. What will you do with what you now know? Your heart raced, the pressure mounting in your chest. The choice was excruciating. You had always been a part of this forest, but now the stakes were higher. What you chose would not only shape the future of this land but could ripple outward, changing the course of everything. The threads you touched were not just the stories of the forest, they were the stories of the world, and they had been waiting for someone to understand them, someone who could unravel the deeper meaning beneath the surface. You turned your gaze to the threads again, following their twists and turns, the way they seemed to glow brighter the closer you came. You saw the paths of life, each one distinct, each one connected to a different choice, a different possibility. The world around you shimmered as if the very fabric of reality were bending, and you knew that each step you took would have consequences far beyond what you could imagine. There was the thread that led into the heart of the forest, deep within the ancient woods, where the trees stretched higher than you had ever seen, their roots burrowing into the earth like veins in a living organism. That path seemed to pulse with the power of creation, of life and rebirth, a path that promised deeper connection to the forest, to the earth itself. It was the path of harmony, the one that would continue the cycle of life as it had been for millennia. But there was also the thread that led into the clearing, where the moonlight bathed everything in an unnatural glow, and where the stones shimmered with secrets long buried. This thread seemed darker, more complex, as though it held within it the potential for both great revelation and unspeakable loss. It was a path of discovery, yes, but at what cost? The figure had warned you. The forest had warned you. Some knowledge, once gained, could never be unlearned. The figure in the clearing shifted, and its form grew even more distinct, as if becoming more solid with each passing moment. It was no longer just a manifestation of the land, but something more, a keeper of these secrets, a guide to the very heart of the world. Its voice, when it came, was both gentle and firm, like a whispering wind moving through the trees. The forest has guided you to this point. You have been chosen not by chance, but because you have the strength to face what others cannot. But the decision is yours. The forest can no longer protect you from the consequences of your actions. It has shown you its heart. It has revealed its secrets. What will you do with them? You closed your eyes, breathing deeply, trying to steady the flood of emotions that threatened to overwhelm you. Fear, curiosity, hope, regret. Every fiber of your being screamed for answers, for clarity, but the truth was that there was no simple answer. This was not a choice between good and evil, between right and wrong. It was a choice between paths, each leading to a different future, each carrying its own burden. Would you take the path of knowledge, embracing the unknown, uncovering the deepest secrets of the forest and the universe? Would you accept the weight of the forest's heart, knowing that with it came the responsibility to protect and preserve its balance? Or would you turn away, leaving the knowledge buried, protecting the forest's ancient secrets and maintaining the equilibrium that had existed for so long? You opened your eyes, and for a moment, everything seemed to fall away. The threads were still there, but they no longer felt like a tangled web. They were pathways, each one open before you, each one offering something different. You could feel the pulse of the forest in the air, the breath of the earth beneath you, and the stars above, watching, waiting. The decision was not just yours, it was the forest's too, for it had drawn you here for a reason. It had chosen you as much as you had chosen it. You are not alone in this choice, the figure said, its voice quieter now, as if acknowledging the weight of your inner turmoil. The forest is with you, and it will be with you no matter which path you take. But know this, whatever you choose, you will become part of the story. You will become part of the heart of the forest. And your decision will echo through time, shaping the future of this land and perhaps the world. The words settled in your mind like the final stroke of a painter's brush, and you knew then that there was no turning back. The moment had come. You had reached the edge of the known, the edge of your journey, and now it was time to take the next step. You turned toward the thread that led deeper into the heart of the forest, its glow pulsing with a soft, rhythmic pulse. The path before you seemed inviting, warm with the promise of connection. It was the path of balance, of understanding. It was the way of the land, the path that respected the natural order of things. But then you turned to the other path, the one that led toward the clearing. The moonlight bathed it in an eerie silver glow, and the stones that littered the ground seemed to whisper secrets, their edges worn smooth by centuries of forgotten lives. This path promised discovery, but at what cost? It was the road less traveled, the one that could either reveal the deepest truths or unravel everything you had known. It was the path of power, of knowledge that could change everything, but could also destroy. You reached out, fingers hovering over the threads, and in that moment, everything seemed to come into focus. The decision was no longer just a choice between two paths. It was a choice between two versions of yourself. One path would deepen your connection to the world, to the forest, to the heartbeat of life itself. The other would transform you, alter you, take you to places you had never imagined, and perhaps never could return from. The weight of the forest gaze was upon you. The threads pulsed around you, and for a moment, everything seemed to fall silent. And then you made your choice. The moment you made your decision, the very air around you seemed to ripple, as though reality itself was bending to accommodate the path you had chosen. The threads of fate that had once danced around you like ethereal, glowing strands were now solid, tangible, extending outward in clear, definitive lines. Each path seemed to hum with an energy of its own, and as you took your first step forward, you felt the land shift beneath you, guiding you into the unknown. The figure in the clearing did not move, but its presence seemed to grow, as if it were becoming part of the land itself. It was both a guardian and a guide, a creature that existed at the very threshold of knowledge and power. It watched you with its dark, infinite eyes, and for a moment, you felt as though it were seeing into the very core of your being, understanding your deepest fears, your hidden desires, and your unspoken hopes. "You have chosen," it murmured, its voice a soft echo in the wind. "The forest will remember your decision, guardian, and the heart will guide you as it has always guided those who have come before." Your choice felt like a weight that settled into the pit of your stomach, but it was not a burden, it was a responsibility. You had not merely walked into the forest and discovered its secrets. You had now become a part of them, woven into the very fabric of the land. You could feel it in the earth beneath your feet, the air in your lungs, the rhythm of the wind as it rustled the trees overhead. The path ahead was not what you had expected. It was not a simple road, nor was it an easy journey. The deeper you went into the forest, the darker it became. The trees around you grew taller and more twisted, their gnarled branches reaching up like skeletal hands, blocking the moonlight and casting long, jagged shadows across the ground. The air was thick with moisture, the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves filling your nostrils. Yet, despite the eerie atmosphere, there was an undeniable pull forward. The thread you followed shimmered in the dark, pulsing with a soft light, guiding your every step. It was as though the land itself was alive, a conscious being that was aware of your presence and your decision. And as you moved deeper into the forest, you could feel the connection growing stronger, the bond between you and the heart of the forest becoming more intimate, more profound. The path wound through dense thickets, over tangled roots, and across small streams that trickled through the underbrush. The sounds of the forest were muffled here, the usual rustling of animals and the distant calls of birds replaced by an oppressive silence. The trees seemed to close in around you, their branches creaking and groaning as if they were aware of your intrusion. And then, ahead you saw it, the heart. It was not what you had imagined. The heart of the forest was not a glowing orb or a hidden temple, but a place. A clearing, surrounded by ancient trees whose trunks were as wide as the span of a house. Their bark was dark, nearly black, and covered in moss and vines that seemed to pulse with life. The air here was heavy, saturated with the energy of the land, and the ground beneath your feet hummed with a soft, rhythmic pulse, like the beating of a great heart. At the center of the clearing there was a stone circle, ancient, worn, and covered with the roots of the surrounding trees. It was not a place of worship, nor a place of sacrifice. It was simply there, as though it had always been, waiting for you to find it. You stood at the edge of the circle, your heart racing, and for the first time, you felt as though you had truly entered the heart of the forest. The air around you shimmered with energy, and the ground beneath your feet seemed to vibrate with an unseen force. The forest was alive in ways you had never imagined, each tree, each root, each blade of grass imbued with a living energy that pulsed through everything. The threads of fate were now all around you, stretching out from the stone circle and weaving their way into the very fabric of the forest. You could see them clearly now, these intricate paths of light and shadow, stretching out in every direction, like the veins of a great ancient being. And you realized, with a jolt of understanding, that you were no longer a mere observer, you were part of this web, a part of the heart itself. The figure, still standing at the edge of the clearing, spoke again, its voice resonating in the depths of your soul. "You have arrived," it said. "This is the heart, the source of all things. the land's pulse. You have chosen to understand, to see what others cannot. And now you must choose again. You blinked in confusion, but the figure's words hung in the air, suspended as though waiting for you to comprehend them. The heart does not simply give knowledge. The figure continued, its form now more defined, more solid, as though it had become one with the land. It takes as well. To see the future, to understand the threads of fate, to witness the fabric of existence, you must pay a price. The heart will show you the truths of the world, the deepest secrets of the land and the cosmos. But you must choose what to sacrifice in return. Your heart skipped a beat and the air around you seemed to freeze. The forest was silent, and for a moment, you could hear nothing but the sound of your own breath. The weight of the figure's words settled over you like a blanket, smothering you in their gravity. To understand the heart's secrets, it said, you must give something of yourself. Not your body, not your spirit, but something deeper. A memory, a feeling, a choice. The figure's gaze turned toward the stone circle, and for a moment, you thought you saw something flicker within it. Something ancient, something powerful, pulsing like a living heartbeat. The price is not always clear, it continued, but the heart will take what it needs. In exchange for the knowledge you seek, it will demand something precious from you. And that thing once given can never be returned. You stood at the edge of the stone circle, your mind racing. The weight of the choice before you pressed down on you like an iron weight. What would you give? What would you sacrifice for the knowledge you sought? As you pondered this, you could feel the presence of the forest growing stronger, its energy building with every passing moment. The trees, the stones, the very ground beneath you seemed to pulse with anticipation, as though they too were waiting for your answer. The heart was waiting for you to choose what you would give in exchange for its secrets. What will you sacrifice? The figure asked again, its voice now a low, penetrating hum, as though it were vibrating through the very earth beneath your feet. What is precious enough to offer in exchange for the truth? The weight of the decision was almost unbearable, and yet you knew that there was no turning back. The heart had already marked you, and you had already walked the path. Now it was time to make the final choice. You closed your eyes and took a deep breath, feeling the pulse of the forest in your chest. The threads of fate, the heart, the forest, it was all connected. And now it was up to you to decide what you were willing to give in return. The stillness of the forest pressed in around you like the very air was heavy with expectation, the weight of your decision palpable. Every tree, every whisper of wind through the leaves seemed to hold its breath, waiting for you to speak, to make your choice. The heart of the forest pulsed with an energy that was not just a heartbeat, but a call. A summons to choose, to give, to surrender something you had never fully understood you had until now. The figure in the clearing stood motionless, its presence like a shadow that wrapped around you, not threatening but inescapable. The air seemed to vibrate with its waiting. It had spoken of sacrifice, of exchange, but the cost remained a mystery, a hidden price tied to the very fabric of existence. The heart, it had said, would take what it needed, and the sacrifice would never be returned. You took a slow, steadying breath, feeling the cool air fill your lungs. A part of you wanted to run, to turn away from this moment of choice, to leave the threads, the heart, the weight of it all behind. But that part of you felt distant now, like a fading echo. You had walked too far, uncovered too much, and to turn back would be to deny everything the forest had shown you, everything it had prepared you for. The knowledge was already a part of you, woven into your very soul. You could not unsee the patterns of fate, the tapestry of the world laid bare before you. You could not return to innocence, to ignorance. And yet, the sacrifice remained a question without an answer. What would the heart demand of you? What was precious enough to exchange for the secrets it held? The answer was elusive, a dark thread buried deep within your heart, just out of reach. What is it you will give, guardian? The figure's voice echoed softly, as though it was coming from both within you and from beyond. The heart demands something deep, something you may not even know you possess. But it is not just your mind or your body that it craves. It seeks something that transcends the self. A piece of your soul. Your heart skipped a beat. A piece of your soul? The figure's words lingered in the air, like a whisper that reached into your very core, pulling at something deep within you. It wasn't the kind of sacrifice that could be easily understood or quantified. It was not a single object you could hold in your hand, nor was it a simple action that could be undone. No, this sacrifice was woven into the very fabric of who you were, something abstract and intangible. The figure had said it was something precious, something that could never be returned. But what could that possibly mean? You turned your gaze back to the stone circle, where the very earth seemed to breathe. The stones, ancient and worn, pulsed with a light that flickered like a dying ember, as if they too were waiting for your choice. The air around you thickened, humming with an almost electric charge, and the forest seemed to close in, becoming a vast, living organism that was conscious of your every thought, your every hesitation. The trees swayed slightly, their twisted branches groaning as if in response to the pressure in the air. A low, rumbling sound came from deep within the forest, something ancient, something primordial, and you realized with a sudden shiver that this place was not just a location. It was alive. The heart itself was a living entity, older than any of the trees, older than the forest, older than time itself. You closed your eyes again, searching within yourself for the thing that the heart would ask for, the thing you would have to give up. The answer did not come immediately. It did not come in the form of a clear memory or an object. Instead, it arrived like a whisper, soft like a forgotten dream, but undeniably real. It was not one thing but many, a culmination of your experiences, your desires, your fears. The heart would ask for your connection to the world, your place in it, the very thing that made you feel rooted to the earth, that made you feel like you belonged. It would take your understanding of the balance, the delicate balance of life and death, of the living and the decaying, and turn it into something else, something darker. The heart would take your innocence, your sense of wonder, and reshape it into something more profound, more permanent. What will you give, guardian? The figure's voice echoed once more, the question now a soft, melodic hum that vibrated in your chest. What will you offer to gain the knowledge that lies beyond? It was no longer a choice between good and evil, between right and wrong. It was a choice between two versions of yourself, the one who could continue to walk the earth with a sense of belonging, of balance, of peace, and the one who would walk the same earth but forever changed, touched by the heart, consumed by its knowledge, its power. The path you chose would not simply shape your future, it would transform you. A deep, aching sorrow filled your chest as the truth began to settle over you. You would have to let go of something you could not afford to lose. The forest would take it from you and you would have no choice but to give it up. You felt it in the air, in the very pulse of the ground beneath your feet. It was not just the heart that you were joining, it was the land itself. You were becoming part of the forest, part of its history, part of its story. But at what cost? The figure watching you said nothing. It was waiting. What is precious to you? It repeated, its voice now impossibly soft, as though it were speaking directly into your mind. What will you sacrifice for the knowledge you seek? A deep, quiet realization settled in your chest. The sacrifice was not just the loss of an object or a moment, it was the loss of your own understanding. It was the letting go of the world you had known, the world of balance and peace, and stepping into something darker, something more complex. To gain the heart's knowledge, you had to give up the ability to see the world with innocent eyes, to be forever bound to the land, to the forest, and to its secrets. You could not return to the way you were before. You would be changed forever. You looked at the figure one last time, and as if sensing your final decision, it stepped forward. The presence of the figure seemed to grow, its form blurring, becoming one with the air, one with the trees. Its eyes, deep and endless, seemed to look straight through you. It did not need to speak. It did not need to say anything else. You understood. You have chosen, the figure whispered, and now the heart will take what is its due. The moment those words were spoken, the ground trembled beneath you. The stones in the circle began to glow with an intense light, their surface shifting, becoming molten. The air crackled with energy, and the sound of the wind through the trees grew louder, a deafening roar that seemed to vibrate through your very bones. For the first time, you felt the full force of the heart's power. It was like nothing you had ever experienced, a force beyond comprehension, beyond time itself. The land was alive with it. The forest was alive with it. And as the energy of the heart filled your every pore, you felt it, a part of you, something you hadn't even known you had, slipping away. It was as though the heart had reached into the deepest recesses of your soul, pulling out the essence of who you were, the connection you had to the world. It was a quiet, almost gentle removal, and yet it left you feeling incomplete, like a part of you had been forever severed. And as the final pulse of energy surged through you, you understood. You had given up your innocence. Your connection to the world as you once knew it had been altered, reshaped, and in its place, you had gained something far more powerful, far more profound. But you had paid a price. The world around you faded, and the heart of the forest's secrets were revealed in full. The forest trembled as the last of the energy flowed into you, seeping through your veins, vibrating in your bones. The world around you had changed. The air felt heavier, as though the weight of the knowledge you now carried pressed against every part of your being. You could feel it, the change. It wasn't just the pulse of the heart you had connected with. It was something more profound, more primal. The land itself had marked you, reshaped you, taken something of you that could never be returned. The clearing before you shimmered with the light of ancient forces, but the light was not warm. It was cold, almost unearthly, casting long shadows over the stone circle. The trees around you seemed different now, their gnarled branches twisting and turning in strange, unnatural patterns. The forest no longer whispered with the familiar voices of leaves and wind. Instead, there was a deeper hum, a low, vibrating frequency that resonated through the soil, through the very air you breathed. The forest was alive, yes, but now it was awake in ways it had never been before. And you too were awake. You opened your eyes to find the forest had shifted. The once comforting canopy above now felt like a vast, unknowable expanse, each tree's silhouette sharper, its branches more twisted. The vibrant greens of the leaves had dulled, turning shades of deep purples, bruised blues, and somber grays. It was as if the forest itself had aged, its timelessness suddenly turned into something more fragile, more vulnerable. You felt the weight of time pressing on you now. This was no longer the innocent world of rustling leaves and distant bird calls you had known. This was a land that had seen countless cycles of life and death, and you had become a part of that cycle. The heart had spoken to you, and its voice still echoed within your mind, vibrating like a distant but ever-present hum. You understood now that you had given up something more precious than you could have ever imagined. The ability to see the world without the weight of its history, its endless layers of sorrow, joy, and destruction. Your innocence had been ripped away, but in its place, you had gained a depth of understanding. A vision that was no longer clouded by the simplicity of life as it once was. The sacrifice had been subtle, like the gradual fading of light at dusk. You hadn't felt it all at once, but now it was undeniable. It wasn't the loss of a single memory, nor the erasure of a single feeling. It was the loss of pure connection to the world. The way you had once simply been, without the weight of understanding. It had been taken, replaced with something much heavier, an awareness of the delicate balance between life and death, of the threads that connected all things, of the constant struggle between creation and decay. You stepped forward, your feet sinking into the soft, moss-covered earth. The pulse of the land, the heartbeat of the heart, thrummed in your chest, guiding you, pushing you forward. You were no longer just a wanderer in the forest. You were part of it now. It was as if the very soil had become a part of you, the roots of the trees wrapping around your soul, binding you to the land. You could feel the changes in the air, the way the wind had shifted. It no longer felt like a gentle breeze, a soothing caress. It was sharp, filled with intent, and as it brushed against your skin, it carried with it the whispers of ancient voices. The forest was speaking to you, but it was not the soft, reassuring murmurs you had once heard. No, this was different. These whispers were knowledge, ancient truths, the kind that had been buried for centuries, millennia even, beneath the earth. The trees watched you. The way their branches swayed now was deliberate, purposeful. They had not been trees for a long time, not just mere beings of wood and bark. They were keepers of time, of knowledge, of the ancient wisdom of the earth. The forest itself seemed to hum with life and death, constantly shifting between the two, caught in an eternal dance of creation and destruction. You had always sensed the presence of the trees, but now you felt them, each one an individual, each one a sentient being watching you, waiting. You continued walking, the stone circle behind you now fading into the distance, leaving only the dark expanse of the forest ahead. The forest had always been a place of mystery, but now it was a place of intimacy. You could feel its pulse, its energy, its presence surrounding you. You could hear the low groan of the ancient trees, their roots shifting beneath the earth, reaching out toward you as if acknowledging your place within this cycle. The wind carried with it the scent of damp earth, but there was something more now, a metallic tang like the blood of the forest. The trees above you were thick, their branches twisting upward into a darkened sky, but it wasn't the sky you had once known. No, the sky had changed as well. The stars had disappeared, replaced by a swirling expanse of dark clouds, their edges cracked open with streaks of violet lightning. There was no moon, no gentle light to guide you. Only darkness, and in that darkness, you could sense the movement of something watching you, something beyond the trees, beyond the heart. A low rumble of thunder echoed in the distance, but it wasn't the storm you had expected. This was different. This was the sound of the forest awakening. You had become its pulse, its rhythm. The forest's heartbeat had become yours, and with each passing step, the connection grew stronger. The trees, the earth, the wind, they were all part of you now, and you were part of them. As you walked deeper into the forest, you began to notice the subtle changes in the landscape. The once vibrant flowers that had dotted the ground now lay wilting, their colors faded to dull, muted tones. The streams that had once flowed with clear, pure water now ran dark, thick, like ink staining the earth. The birds that had once sung their sweet songs were now silent, their nests abandoned. The forest was dying, slowly, painfully, but it was also changing, shifting into something new, something unknown. And you could feel it. The forest had always been a place of life and death, but now, it was a place of transformation. The boundaries between life and death, creation and destruction, had become blurred, intertwined, and you were at the center of it all. You had seen the threads of fate, the interwoven paths that led from the past to the present, from the present to the future. But now you understood that the threads were not fixed. They were fluid, shifting, ever-changing like the forest itself. The heart had not just revealed the secrets of the forest, it had revealed the secrets of existence. The delicate balance between life and death, between creation and decay, was not something that could be understood with the mind alone. It had to be felt, experienced. You had crossed into a realm where time was no longer linear, where past, present, and future were all one. And in this realm, you were both a part of the land and something more. The forest had chosen you, but it had also changed you. You were no longer just a wanderer, a seeker. You were now a guardian, a protector of this delicate balance, this ever-shifting world. You felt the pull of the forest in your chest, the steady rhythm of its pulse guiding you deeper into its heart. The trees seemed to open before you, creating a path that was both familiar and strange. The further you walked, the darker the forest became, and yet, the more you felt at home. This was no longer a place of danger, it was a place of belonging. The forest had claimed you, and in doing so, it had reshaped you, changed you. You were no longer separate from it. You were part of its eternal cycle. The figure, now just a shadow in the distance, watched you, but it was no longer a question, no longer a decision to be made. The heart had claimed you, and in return, it had shown you the truth. You could not return to the world as it once was. The veil had been lifted, and you were no longer blind to the threads of fate. And as the forest's pulse continued to beat in time with your own, you realized that you were no longer just a part of the world. You were the world, and it was you. The forest stretched before you, dark and dense, like a vast ocean of ancient wood and soil, stretching endlessly in every direction. Yet, with every step you took deeper into the heart of the land, you felt an undeniable pull, something drawing you, guiding you. The forest's pulse was now your own heartbeat, and the rhythm of its whispering trees was the song that sang through your soul. The shadows around you grew longer, but it was no longer a source of fear, no longer an omen. These shadows were part of you now. They were the echoes of the forest, the hidden parts of the world that had always been present, but which you had never before truly seen. The truth of existence lay in these shadows, and as you moved through them, you began to understand. You were no longer a passive observer. You were a living, breathing part of the world, interwoven with it in ways that defied the simple understanding of life and death. The trees around you seemed to lean closer, their bark smoother now, their branches twisted into patterns that almost seemed to form shapes, faces, figures, and hands reaching for you. The forest had always been alive, but now it seemed more aware, more conscious of your presence. Their gnarled fingers curled around your soul, pulling you deeper into the mysteries that had once been beyond your reach. The forest spoke to you in a language older than time itself, a language without words. It was a language of sensations, of emotions felt in your chest, in your stomach, in the very marrow of your bones. You could feel it now, a deep, unspoken knowledge stirring in the very center of you. The pulse of the land, of the trees, of the earth, they were all part of the same song. And you were the chorus. You were a note sung by the wind, the crackle of the leaves, the murmur of the stream. As you continued walking, the path beneath you seemed to change. The moss and earth shifted, as though they were alive and reacting to your every step. The stone circle you had left behind seemed to fade into memory, but it was not truly gone. It was within you now, a place you could return to at any moment. The heartbeat of the forest had become your own. You stopped for a moment, breathing in the air, the cool, damp scent of the earth, the rich, woody aroma of the trees, and something else. A subtle undercurrent, a tingling sensation that ran along your skin, made your heart race. It was the feeling of something approaching, something ancient and powerful, but not hostile. It was the presence of something deep within the forest, something that had always existed but had never fully shown itself until now. The trees around you seemed to bend and sway as though parting for something. The wind whispered through the branches, low and deep, like a murmur in the distance, and the rustling leaves created a sound that was almost musical, as if nature itself were creating a melody just for you. The path before you was no longer a simple trail, it had become something more. It was a passage, a threshold. Ahead, in the distance, you could see the faint outline of a figure, tall and shrouded in shadows. It was no longer the figure that had guided you to the heart. This one was different. This one felt older, as ancient as the forest itself. Its form was indistinct, shifting like smoke twisting on the wind, yet you could sense its presence, its weight, as if the very fabric of reality bent around it. You have arrived. The voice was not one you could hear, but one you could feel. It was a sensation, a presence speaking directly to the deepest part of you. You have taken the path, and now you stand before the threshold of transformation. The heart has accepted you, and now it is time for you to decide your purpose. You didn't know how to respond, for the words that passed between you and this presence were not words at all. They were thoughts, images, feelings. In the space of a single moment, you understood the forest's true nature. The heart had not only shown you the truth, it had revealed that truth itself was fluid, ever-changing, a shifting thing that could never be fully grasped by mortal hands. The forest's true power lay not in its secrets, not in its knowledge, but in its ability to change, to evolve, to renew itself constantly. What will you do now? The presence lingered, still waiting for you to understand. It was as if the forest itself was asking you this question, as if the land and the creatures within it were all turning toward you for the answer. The forest had not just shaped you, it had merged with you. It had drawn you into its eternal cycle, a cycle of life, death, and rebirth. You were no longer just a traveler in the woods, you were part of them, a new force within the forest. You could feel its power coursing through you now, the pulse of life and decay, the heartbeat of every leaf, every root, every stone beneath your feet. But with that power came a responsibility, a burden that could not be ignored. You were not simply a keeper of the forest. You were a part of it, and the land had chosen you to protect its delicate balance. It was not just the forest that needed you, it was the world that needed you. The threads of fate, which you had seen and touched, were still unfolding, still changing, and you had been woven into them. The knowledge you had gained, the price you had paid, would help guide the future of the land, but you could not do it alone. The figure ahead of you, the one that had been waiting, shifted once again. It was not a being of flesh and bone, but something else. A guardian, a protector of this sacred place. It was the true heart of the forest, the ancient spirit that had watched over these woods long before you had arrived. It was the embodiment of the forest's essence, and now, it spoke to you not as a guide, but as a fellow being bound to the same fate. We are one now, the voice echoed inside you, reverberating through every fiber of your being. The forest's future rests with you. You are its protector now, its guardian. And with that comes a choice. Will you help it grow, help it renew itself, or will you let it wither? Will you become the guardian of the cycles of life and death, or will you succumb to the decay that all things must face? You closed your eyes and let the question settle within you, allowing the weight of it to sink deep into your core. You had already made your choice, but now you understood the true depth of it. The heart had not just changed you, it had made you a part of the forest's fate. You were its steward now, bound to it as surely as the trees were bound to the earth. You would protect it, nurture it, and watch over it as it continued to evolve and grow. But there would be sacrifices ahead. The forest was not just a place of life, it was also a place of death, of decay. And in protecting it, you would face that decay, you would experience it firsthand. The forest's cycles were harsh, unforgiving, but they were also necessary. The ancient figure watched you, its form flickering like a fading flame, waiting for you to take the final step into your new existence. It is your decision now, it whispered, fading into the shadows. Step forward, guardian of the heart. You took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the forest's energy flow through you, a force as old as the earth itself. Your eyes opened, and the path ahead of you seemed clearer now. The trees, the land, the air, they were all yours to protect, to guide. The forest had chosen you, and you had chosen it in return. With your newfound purpose, you stepped forward into the shadows, the forest welcoming you as one of its own. The wind shifted as you stepped further into the depths of the forest, the rhythm of your heartbeat synchronizing with the pulse of the land beneath your feet. You could feel the presence of the heart deep within you, like an ancient whisper in your soul, and the weight of your transformation settled around you, like a cloak woven from the very essence of the forest. The trees loomed around you, their twisted limbs seemingly stretching toward the sky, but they were no longer threatening. They were companions now, silent witnesses to your journey and your destiny. The further you moved, the more the atmosphere around you seemed to change. The air became thicker, the shadows longer, as if the very fabric of the forest was folding in on itself. Every leaf seemed to shimmer with life, as if it were watching you, waiting for your next decision. The weight of the forest's secrets pressed down on you with each step, yet the burden was not a heavy one. It was a responsibility that felt strangely natural, as if you had been born for this very purpose. As you walked, You could sense the subtle undercurrent of magic that flowed through the forest, threading its way between the trees, the earth, the sky. It was the same magic that had once drawn you here, the same magic that had entwined your fate with that of the forest. But now the magic felt different. It was more immediate, more personal. It was not something distant or abstract. It was a force you had become a part of. The very air around you seemed alive, humming with a power that pulsed in your veins, reminding you that you were no longer just a visitor to this place. You were its steward, its guardian. The forest whispered to you in ways that were both soothing and unnerving. You could hear the wind rustling through the trees, but now it seemed to carry words, phrases just out of reach. The very ground beneath your feet seemed to hum with ancient energy, as if the forest itself was breathing, sighing, speaking to you through the language of roots and branches. You could feel the pull of something deep within the forest, something hidden beneath the soil, buried in the depths of the earth. It called to you, drawing you toward it, but you could not yet fully understand its purpose. In the distance you saw a flicker of light through the trees. It was faint at first, like the glow of a distant star, but as you moved closer, it grew brighter, clearer. The light seemed to dance, flickering like a flame caught in a breeze, and with it came a sense of familiarity, like a memory you could almost grasp but could not quite reach. The forest around you grew even more dense, the trees clustering together like sentinels guarding something important. You continued on, the air thickening with each step, until the path before you opened into a large clearing. The trees here were ancient, their trunks twisted and gnarled, their branches stretching up toward the sky like the fingers of an ancient deity. In the center of the clearing stood a massive stone archway, weathered and worn by the passage of time. It was carved with intricate symbols, but the meaning of them eluded you. They were shapes, patterns, lines that seemed to shift and change before your eyes, as if they were alive. And above the archway, hovering just out of reach, was the flickering light you had been following, a faint ethereal glow like a distant star. You stood before the archway, the weight of its presence almost overwhelming. It was ancient, older than anything you had encountered in the forest. The air around it hummed with energy, and you could feel the magic vibrating through the ground beneath your feet, as if the archway were a gateway to something beyond. The whispering of the forest seemed to grow louder here, like a distant chant or song, but the words were still beyond your comprehension. You could feel the pull of the archway, the call of something hidden on the other side, something ancient, something that had been waiting for you. The moment you stepped closer to the archway, the air around you shifted. The temperature dropped, and the ground beneath you seemed to ripple, as if reality itself were bending. The faint light that hovered above the archway grew brighter, flickering like a flame in the wind, and you felt it reach out, as though it were beckoning you, drawing you toward it. But then, the whispers grew louder, and you could hear them clearly now. Do you understand? The voice came from within the archway, from beyond it, yet it was not a voice you could hear with your ears. It was a sensation, a thought, a presence that resonated in your mind. This is the veil. The boundary between life and death, between time and eternity. What lies beyond is not meant for mortal beings. The heart has given you its knowledge, but it has not given you immortality. To cross this threshold is to abandon what you once were, to become something new. A guardian, a part of the land, a keeper of the cycles. The words sent a shiver down your spine. You had come so far, walked so deeply into the heart of the forest, but this was something different. The veil was not just a place. It was a test. It was a boundary, a dividing line between what you had been and what you would become. To cross it was to step into the unknown, to leave behind the world you had known, the life you had lived. It was to embrace the forest fully, to give up the last vestiges of your old existence and to become one with the land. The light above the archway pulsed again, and the whispers grew louder, urging you forward. You must decide, the voice said. Will you remain as you are, bound to the mortal world, or will you step beyond the veil and become what you were always meant to be? A guardian of the land, a keeper of the cycles, a protector of the heart. The choice lay before you, but it was not a choice of life and death. It was a choice of transformation, of becoming something new, something more. The forest had given you its power, its knowledge, its connection, but it was not without a cost. This final threshold would sever the last tie to your former self, to the world of men, to the world of time. It would bind you to the forest, to the earth, to the ever-turning wheel of life and death. But as you stood there on the precipice of this decision, something within you stirred. The connection to the heart, to the forest, had always been a part of you, and now it was the very core of your being. You could feel the pulse of the land within your chest, and the forest seemed to whisper your name, its song now one of invitation, not fear. This was not a step into the unknown, It was a return to something deeper, something ancient. You had been drawn here for a reason. The forest had claimed you, and now you had a chance to embrace its legacy. But the decision still lingered. Would you step beyond the veil? Would you abandon your mortal life and become something more? Or would you remain on this side, forever a guardian from afar, still bound by the rules of time, of mortality? The archway pulsed with light, and the whispers of the forest pressed in around you, waiting for your answer. The light from the archway flickered once more, its glow casting strange shadows that danced on the ground, as if the world itself were unsure of what would come next. The wind whispered, carrying with it the voices of ancient spirits, of past guardians who had stood before this very threshold, making the same choice you now faced. The presence that filled the air around you grew heavier, as if the entire forest was holding its breath, waiting for you to make your decision. You stood there, at the boundary between the world you had known and the unknown future that stretched out before you. The archway loomed ahead, an eternal doorway to something far beyond the understanding of mortal minds. It called to you with a magnetic pull, beckoning you to step forward, to leave behind the weight of your past life and embrace the fullness of your destiny. But what would you become on the other side? You had already given up so much. Your innocence, your sense of peace, your connection to the simple joys of life. The forest had taken those from you in exchange for its knowledge and its power. But this final choice was different. This was no longer just about gaining power or insight. This was about becoming a part of the forest, becoming its eternal guardian, a being of the land, bound to the cycles of life, death, and rebirth. The whispers of the forest pressed into your mind again, like a soft hum in the back of your thoughts. The trees shifted around you, their branches creaking and groaning as if urging you to make your move. The forest had already begun to change because of you. Its pulse, its rhythm, its very soul had merged with yours. And yet, there was one last step to be taken. The veil. Your thoughts were a swirling storm of emotion. Fear, uncertainty, desire, and something deeper. Something primal. You could feel the connection between yourself and the land around you, but now you wondered, could you truly leave behind the world you had known? Could you sever your ties to your past, to the memories of your life as a mortal, in exchange for something that could never be undone? The voice came again, clearer now, resonating deep within you like a chorus of voices. The forest was speaking not just to your mind, but to your very being. The veil is not a wall. It is a door. A threshold between what you were and what you will become. To step through it is to release your past. It is to become timeless, eternal, a part of the land itself. But once you cross, you cannot return. You will never walk among mortals again. You will be bound to the forest, bound to the cycles of life and death as its keeper, its protector, its guardian. But there is no turning back. The forest will own you. The forest will be you. The wind shifted again, this time carrying a deep, resonant hum, like the vibration of a distant bell tolling, signaling the closing of a chapter. The trees around you seemed to sway in agreement, their leaves rustling with the wind's song, the sound of fate. You had felt this call before, but now it was different. Now it was undeniable. The forest had been preparing you for this moment. It had shaped you, guided you, and now it was asking you to join it completely. You thought of the life you had left behind, the moments you had cherished, the people you had known. You thought of the laughter of your past, the warmth of human connection, the fleeting beauty of time. It was a life you had once held dear, and the loss of it now felt like a chasm opening in your chest. But even as you thought of all you would be leaving behind, something else stirred within you. The forest had already become a part of you. Its pulse was in your veins, its whispers in your ears. The land had claimed you, and it was asking you to take your place within it. There was a deep, echoing silence that settled around you as you considered what would come next. The light above the archway swirled, and you could see flashes of memories, flickers of your life before the forest, moments you had forgotten in the haze of your transformation. You saw the faces of those you had left behind, the people whose lives had intersected with yours. The laughter, the tears, the warmth of connection. The memories tugged at your heart, pulling you back toward a life that no longer felt like your own. But then the voice of the forest spoke again, gentle and insistent. What will you choose, guardian? Will you step forward into eternity, into the heart of the land, and become what you were always meant to be? Or will you hold on to the past, to the fleeting nature of time, and walk away from your true calling? The choice was excruciating, and yet, as the weight of it pressed down on you, you began to understand. You had already stepped into the forest cycle. You had already given your essence to the land. To step forward was not to abandon your humanity, it was to transcend it. To become something greater, something eternal. To become one with the land, with the cycle of life and death that had always been beyond human understanding. And yet, the past still clung to you. The memories, the love, the connections you had made, they were not easily erased. But you knew deep down that the forest had not taken those things from you. It had transformed them. What you had once known would still live within you, but in a different form. You would carry the echoes of the world you had left behind, but you would no longer be bound to it. The forest would become your new world, and within it, you would find new ways to connect, to grow, and to experience existence. You closed your eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, and as you did, the world seemed to pause. The air stilled. The wind halted. The trees stopped swaying. And in that moment of perfect stillness, you realized something. You were not alone. The forest was not just a place, not just an expanse of trees and earth. The forest was a living thing, a vast, ancient consciousness that had watched over the land for eons, and it was with you now. It was not a force that demanded sacrifice. It was a force that embraced you. The forest was not something you had to give up, it was something you had to become. And with that realization, the veil no longer seemed like a barrier, but a gateway. It was not the end of your journey, it was the beginning of something far greater. You stepped forward. The moment your foot crossed the threshold, the world around you shifted. Time itself seemed to bend and warp as the archway closed behind you, and the very air around you hummed with a strange, resonant power. The forest's song grew louder, more distinct, as though the very trees were singing in unison. The earth beneath you shifted and pulsed with energy, and the sky above seemed to part, revealing an endless expanse of stars, a tapestry of light that stretched far beyond the horizon. You could feel it now. Every root, every leaf, every whisper of the wind was part of you. The land was you and you were it. The memories of your past, of the world you had known, faded like a distant dream, replaced by something deeper, something more profound. The forest had not taken anything from you, it had added to you. The connection between all things was clearer now, the delicate threads of life and death intertwined in a way that could never be fully understood, but could only be felt. The pulse of the land echoed through your chest, and in that moment, you understood the true nature of the forest. It was not just a place of growth and decay, it was a place of balance. The forest was not an eternal cycle of life and death. It was the cycle of transformation, of constant change. Every leaf that fell, every branch that broke, every seed that took root, these were not endings. They were beginnings. The forest was not bound to time. It was bound to growth. And now you were part of that growth, part of that eternal transformation. The forest had claimed you, and in return, it had given you everything. You were its guardian, its eternal steward, and you would watch over it not as a keeper of the past, but as a part of its endless future. You were no longer just a wanderer in the woods. You were the woods. You were the land, the trees, the earth. You were the heartbeat of the forest, the pulse of life and death. You were forever.